Chapter 943. 2 days later, Yiguchen and Su Jiqing finally entered the depths of the ancient chaos wasteland. Yiguchen was also about to arrive at the location of the mysterious mineral deposit recorded in the mission. Yiguchen glanced around and found that there were figures flashing around from time to time, all of them heading towards the horizon. It seems that the news of the mysterious mineral deposit has already spread, Yiguchen muttered to himself. I heard that there might be a tomb under the mysterious mineral deposit, Su Jiqing said. Whose tomb? Yiguchen's eyes revealed a strange look. It was a little strange that there was an ancient tomb hidden under the mysterious mineral deposit. I don't know. Su Jiqing also did not have much information. Next, the two of them directly approached the location of the mysterious mineral deposit. At this moment, there were already many people densely packed around. There were geniuses from other dynasties, as well as some rogue cultivators and bandits who ran amok in the ancient chaos wasteland. However, they were only surrounding the mineral deposit. Those closest to it were those from the top 10 dynasties. Yiguchen did not go forward, but stayed in the middle of the crowd with Su Jiqing. At a glance, he found that the mysterious mineral deposit was located in a spacious underground cave. The dark entrance of the cave was like a giant mouth that chose people to devour. It seems that this mineral deposit should have collapsed recently, and there are still remnants of the formation fluctuations. Yiguchen focused his eyes. He was not proficient in formations, but he had dabbled in them. The reason why the surrounding people did not swarm into the cave was because of the remnants of the formation. However, the formation fluctuations were also gradually weakening. It would not be long before it completely dissipated. When that time came, there would definitely be a fierce fight. Yiguchen's gaze shifted again, and he saw the two figures standing at the front of the crowd. It was Ling Moyin and Jiang Yan. Ling Moyin and Jiang Yan were focused on the cave, and did not notice Yiguchen at all. Just as Yiguchen was about to step forward and meet up with him, a voice suddenly rang out. In the distance, a golden beam of light shot over. When the light dissipated, a heroic man wearing golden armor and holding a golden spear appeared. His eyes were filled with disdain as he glanced at Ling Moyin and Jiang Yan. This time, only the two of you came from the Sword Dynasty? From his tone, there seemed to be some disdain. Jean Booby, are you going to interfere as well? Jiang Yan looked at the man called Jean Booby with a serious expression. Jean Booby was ranked 10th on the War God Dynasty's War God list. He was at the first layer of the Divine Dwelling Realm. In the face of such a character, it was no wonder that Jiang Yan and Ling Moyin were on guard. At this moment, they also understood why 3 Gold Emblem disciples were sent for this mission at once. Unfortunately, both Jiang Yan and Ling Moyin had underestimated the difficulty of the task. Seeing Jean Booby's arrival, their hearts tightened. However, that was not all. On the other side, 2 more figures arrived. They were 2 martial artists, one with a golden saber on his back, and the other with a silver saber on his back. Jin Huan, Yin Gu, you're here too. Ling Moyin's expression was even more unpleasant. The gold and silver sabers were called Jin Huan and Yin Gu. They were ranked 11th and 12th on the saber ranking of the Tyrant Saber Dynasty. Both of their cultivations were at the peak of stage 9, but the most powerful thing about them was that they could work together. If the gold and silver sabers worked together, even some of the top 10 geniuses on the saber ranking would be wary. Only the 2 of you came this time. It seems that you won't be able to get this opportunity. Jin Huan glanced at Ling Moyin and shook his head slightly. At this moment, everyone suddenly felt a strange fragrance blow over. When they smelled this fragrance, the male martial artist vaguely felt a ball of evil fire rising in his stomach. The female cultivator, on the other hand, felt slightly dizzy and a faint sense of heat. Could this be? A faint paleness and extreme disgust instantly surfaced on Ling Moyin's cold and delicate face when she caught a whiff of the smell. In the distance, 4 women in pink carried a sedan chair over. Pink Playboy from the Mola dynasty. When they saw who it was, many of the surrounding martial artists were wary. Some of the female martial artists were even fearful. Pink Playboy. Yi Guqin, who was hidden in the crowd, looked at the sedan chair. He had read the information about the Mola dynasty before. Pink Playboy was ranked 7th on the Mola dynasty's blood ranking. He was also a divine dwelling heaven's pride. However, he was most notorious for his unbearable behavior. He liked to torture women to death and then refine them into puppets. Yi Guqin looked at the 4 women carrying the sedan chair. It was obvious that Pink Playboy had used the bodies of the victims to refine puppets. He's here too. Su Jiqing had obviously heard of Pink Playboy's name. Her delicate body could not help but tremble slightly as she moved closer to Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin's eyes were cold. He did not think of himself as a righteous man who punished evil and promoted good. However, people like Pink Playboy were indeed disgusting. Ha, I didn't expect to be accompanied by a beauty. It seems that this time, I won't be too lonely. A sharp and coquettish voice came from the sedan chair. It was terrifying. Pink Playboy. Ling Moyin's face was cold. You're neither a man nor a woman. I can't believe you're here too. Jean Booby's voice was muffled. He did not look happy either. Obviously, he did not like Pink Playboy. Pink Playboy did not directly attack Ling Moyin. When the formation disappears, we'll quickly enter it, find the opportunity, and then leave, Jiang Yan said telepathically. Sigh, we miscalculated. If that's the case, we should have let Dugu Wubai come with us. Ling Moyin felt a little regretful. What's the use of him coming? Can he beat Pink Playboy? Can he defeat Pink Playboy? Jiang Yan still did not think much of it. Seeing this situation, Yi Guqin hesitated for a moment. He did not meet up with Ling Moyin and the others. He took out a mask from his origin ring and put it on. Young Master Dugu, you. Su Jiqing was slightly surprised. Just in case, Yi Guqin said. Under the current situation, if Yi Guqin met up with them openly, it would alert the other dynasty's prodigies. Rather than that, it was better to plan in secret and then strike when they least expected it. 6 hours passed as they waited. The formation ripples that had enveloped the mine had also completely dissipated. The moment it dissipated, all the surrounding prodigies swarmed into the mine. The leaders were naturally the prodigies of the Sword Dynasty, War God Dynasty, Mola Dynasty, and Tyrant Saber Dynasty. Next were the prodigies of the other dynasties, as well as lone cultivators and bandits. Let's go. Yi Guqin and Su Jiqing also entered the mine in a flash. Not long after they entered the mine, another figure rushed over from the distant sky. His aura was extremely powerful. It was Ouyang Fengyun who had rushed over. Looks like I didn't miss the show. Dugu Wubai, are you in? Ouyang Fengyun smiled coldly and entered the mine as well. Chapter 944. The underground cave was extremely deep and wide. It was big enough to accommodate the many figures that were swarming down. The ones at the front were naturally Ling Moyin, Jiang Yan, Jean Booby, the Gold and Silver Blades, Pink Gentleman, and the others. Yi Guqin was at the back and did not rush to the front. After about 15 minutes, the group finally reached the bottom of the underground cave. It was pitch black around them, and hissing sounds could be heard from the darkness. It's the death worms, a martial artist exclaimed. Some martial artists were alarmed, but most of them were still able to maintain their composure. After all, although the death worms were terrifying, there were still many martial artists who had entered the underground cave. Humph. Jean Booby was the first to bear the brunt of the attack. Like a golden god of war, he threw out the golden spear in his hand, piercing through the death worms one after another. Blood splattered everywhere. Ling Moyin and Jiang Yan attacked as well, their swords flashing everywhere. Jin Huan and Yin Gu slashed out glaring saber energy with their long blades, splitting the death worms in front of them in half. Pink Gentleman's technique was rather unique. The 4 pink-clothed female puppets carrying the sedan stood guard around the sedan. Each puppet's strength was comparable to the peak of Stage 9, and their bodies had been refined to be as hard as iron. They were not afraid of the death worm's attacks at all. With the help of these prodigies, the other martial artists were not weak either. After all, those who dared to explore the underground cave were not weaklings. Soon, the group pushed their way through and entered the depths of the mine. After killing a large number of death worms, a stone door appeared at the end of the mine. The stone door looked extremely ancient, and there were mysterious carvings on it. "This is a tomb door." Some martial artists were shocked. They did not expect that there would be a huge tomb hidden in this mysterious mine. "Enter." Jean Boubi had a domineering personality. Without any hesitation, he threw out the golden spear in his hand and smashed the tomb door into pieces. Previously, there were fluctuations of a formation here. Even if the group had entered the underground cave, they would not have been able to destroy the tomb door. However, now that the formation had dissipated, the rotten tomb door was easily destroyed. Inside the tomb door, there were many different tomb passages. Jean Boubi and the others were the first to enter the tomb. "These tombs may lead to some valuable tombs," Su Jiqing said in a low voice. Her beautiful eyes were filled with eagerness. "Yes, but we still have to be careful," Ye Guqin said. As soon as his voice fell, the miserable screams of a martial artist came from a tomb not far away. A hidden weapon mechanism shot out from the tomb and pierced through the martial artist. Seeing this, everyone became even more vigilant. Ye Guqin and Su Jiqing chose a path to enter. Inside the tomb, blazing flames suddenly burst out. Su Jiqing's expression changed as she exclaimed, "It's a heaven and earth flame." That blazing temperature was enough to incinerate the martial artists who entered the tomb. Ye Guqin's expression was indifferent. Pitch-black flames burst out from his eyes. The Nirvana Heart Demon flame turned into a fireball, protecting the two of them within. Although the heaven and earth flame was not weak, Ye Guqin's Nirvana Heart Demon flame was enough to resist it. Soon, Ye Guqin and Su Jiqing came to a tomb. Inside the tomb, there were rotten weapons everywhere. There was no lack of quasi-heaven tribulation divine weapons. Unfortunately, they had long rotted and lost their divinity, losing their value. This should be a divine weapon room. Ye Guqin also felt that it was a pity. However, although these divine weapons were scrapped, some of the rare metals could still be extracted and used as materials to repair the Nine-Dragon Thunder Prison. After that, Ye Guqin and Su Jiqing divided some of the valuable divine weapons equally. Su Jiqing's gaze then turned to the tomb wall. There were relief sculptures of thousands of people worshipping and the scene of a dynasty at its peak. "What's recorded here may be a lost ancient dynasty," Su Jiqing murmured. "Oh." Ye Guqin raised his eyebrows slightly. Could the owner of this tomb be a member of that ancient dynasty? But this place is definitely not the ruins of that ancient dynasty. Ye Guqin shook his head slightly. If the ruins of an ancient dynasty really appeared, it would definitely cause a commotion. "I seem to have seen this dynasty in ancient books. Could it be the ruined Sky Sacred Dynasty?" Su Jiqing said uncertainly. "The ruined Sky Sacred Dynasty?" Ye Guqin looked puzzled. "The ancient sacred dynasty has saints. Its strength is not much weaker than the Overlord-level forces," Su Jiqing explained. "Let's leave first," Ye Guqin said. Regardless of whether the owner of this tomb had anything to do with the ruined Sky Sacred Dynasty, their priority now was to find opportunities. The two of them left the tomb. Not long after, they saw the forked tomb path again. At this moment, Su Qingyu's voice sounded in Ye Guqin's mind. "Take the second tomb path on the left. There may be something good there." Ye Guqin's eyes dimmed. His sea of consciousness had not yet recovered, so his consciousness was not sharp. But Su Qingyu's perception was many times sharper than Ye Guqin's at his peak. Ye Guqin led Su Jiqing into the second tomb path on the left. When they walked into one of the tomb chambers, even with Su Jiqing's cold personality, she could not help but bite her lips as her heart trembled violently. Elixirs. They were all elixirs. Some of the elixirs had been exposed and had lost their medicinal properties, but most of the elixirs were sealed in jade bottles and jade boxes. Elixirs were not like divine weapons. If they were preserved well, their medicinal properties would not be lost for a long time. The lowest grade elixirs are supreme grade elixirs. There are many quasi-sage elixirs. Yiguchen looked at some of the elixirs in the jade bottles and could not help but sigh. For Yiguchen, who had lived a poor life for a while, these quasi-sage elixirs had undoubtedly greatly alleviated his poverty. The real good stuff is in the cauldron, Su Qingyu said. Yiguchen looked at the cauldron in the center of the tomb chamber. He stepped forward and opened it, and an extremely strong pill fragrance spread out. It made people feel as if all their pores had opened up. Inside the cauldron, there were 10 golden elixirs, as if they were refined from gold. They were dazzling and were still incomparably dazzling after time. This is... Yiguchen's expression froze. Nirvana elixir, Su Qingyu said. Nirvana elixir was a sacred grade elixir. As the name implied, if one took this elixir, it would be like nirvana. One's physical body, divine dwelling, and even sea of consciousness would be reborn. This sacred elixir was extremely precious. In the current South Horizon region, except for the overlord forces, it was almost extinct. When I reach the divine dwelling stage, I will need to pass the 4 tribulations of earth, water, fire, and wind. If I have a nirvana elixir, it should be able to help me transform. Yiguchen's eyes were deep. This is a sacred elixir. Su Jiqing was also surprised. But Su Jiqing was not greedy and only accepted 1 nirvana elixir. That's not very good. Yiguchen also did not want to take advantage of Su Jiqing. Jiqing's life was saved by young Master Dugu. Moreover, although the effect of this elixir is good, for me, 1 transformation is enough. Su Jiqing smiled faintly. Yiguchen nodded slightly. He did not try to be pretentious and took the remaining 9 nirvana elixirs. At this moment, a woman in pink appeared at the entrance of the tomb chamber. Her skin was like jade, and her expression was cold and hard. Pink gentleman. Yiguchen's expression froze. Chapter 945. The girl in pink was one of the puppets that carried the palanquin for the pink playboy. Yiguchen understood almost instantly. The pink playboy must have split the 4 puppets up to collect resources. This way, he would undoubtedly obtain more good things. When the pink-clothed puppet saw Yiguchen, a faint cold light flashed in her numb eyes. Her gaze fell on the origin ring on Yiguchen's finger. Swoosh! Without any superfluous words or hesitation, the pink-robed puppet stretched out her pale, jade-like hand and attacked Yiguchen's face. The 9-dragon thunder prison appeared in Yiguchen's hand and attacked the pink-clothed puppet with a sword. Su Jiqing also attacked. Rumble! The sword radiance spread out and turned into a torrent. The pink-clothed puppet's body shook violently and her clothes turned into ashes, revealing her beautiful body. However, her pale body was covered with countless glaring whip marks. Obviously, before she was refined into a puppet, the girl had been treated inhumanely by the pink playboy. Seeing this, Yiguchen's expression became even colder. Su Jiqing also bit her lip and felt extremely disgusted. Boom! The puppet fought with the 2 of them. Its body looked pale and soft, but it was extremely hard and could withstand the attack of the 9-dragon thunder prison. When the puppet attacked, clouds of pink mist spread out from its 7 orifices. Yiguchen's eyes flashed and he hurriedly held his breath. However, he found that the pink mist could seep into his skin through his pores. Yiguchen faintly felt the poisonous gas enter his body and his body become numb. However, in an instant, the heart demon flame in Yiguchen's body swept through and the poisonous gas was immediately burned to ashes. On the other hand, Su Jiqing's face was slightly red and her delicate body was boiling. She seemed to have fallen into a trap. Protect your body with true energy. Hold on, I'll help you right away. Yiguchen said in a low voice. He wanted to get rid of the puppet first and then help Su Jiqing. Su Jiqing hurriedly retreated and sat cross-legged on the ground, using true energy to protect her body. Just as Yiguchen and the puppet were engaged in a fierce battle. In another tomb chamber, a man in a pink robe with a devilish face was looking at the two people opposite him with a playful expression like a cat playing with a mouse. They were Ling Moyin and Jiang Yan. At this moment, both of their expressions were somewhat ugly. Jiang Yan even said, "We've already handed over the opportunity in this tomb chamber to you. What else do you want? How is it?" Hee hee. The pink playboy didn't say anything, but his gaze landed on the tall and slender figure. The black dress accentuated Ling Moyin's curvaceous figure, making her look even more slender and attractive. Ling Moyin gritted her teeth when she sensed the dangerous gaze of the pink gentleman. She said coldly, "Pink gentleman, do you really want to provoke Sacred Cliff College?" Upon hearing Ling Moyin's words, Pink gentleman frowned slightly. The 5 great academies of the Sword Dynasty were indeed not existences that ordinary people dared to provoke. Even the princes of some dynasties were not willing to offend the Golden Emblem disciples of the 5 great academies. The pink gentleman narrowed his eyes and said coldly, "Do you think you can scare me? My Molo dynasty is not on the same side as your Sword Dynasty, pink gentleman, we're not made of clay. If you attack us, you won't have an easy time." Although Jiang Yan said so, there was a hint of fear in his voice. The pink gentleman was ranked 7th on the blood ranking, and his strength was indeed stronger than theirs. Hee hee, I must keep this little girl here. The pink gentleman didn't say anything else and directly attacked. The aura of the divine dwelling stage gushed out, accompanied by a pink mist. Ling Moyin and Jiang Yan also attacked at the same time. The 3 of them suddenly engaged in a fierce battle. But as time passed, Ling Moyin and Jiang Yan were no match for the pink gentleman. The pink mist also seeped into their bodies. Jiang Yan felt his whole body go numb, and Ling Moyin's snow-white skin was covered with a layer of pink. Hee hee, you've been hit by my mandarin duck powder. Little girl, do you still have the strength to resist? The pink gentleman stuck out his tongue and licked his lips. Damn it. Jiang Yan's expression darkened. He felt that the true qi in his body seemed to be stagnant. If you stand between me and my little girl again, I don't mind killing you. The pink gentleman looked at Jiang Yan, his expression suddenly cold. Although he could kill Jiang Yan by force, Jiang Yan was a heaven pride of a false saint family and a Golden Emblem disciple. How could he not have some means to fight back? If Jiang Yan fought back, the pink gentleman wouldn't have it easy. You. Jiang Yan's expression changed. Looking at Ling Moyin, who was gradually losing, he gritted his teeth and retreated. Senior sister Ling, I will avenge you. Jiang Yan, you. Seeing this, Ling Moyin bit her red lips with her jade-like teeth. Her figure instantly dashed in another direction. Can you escape? The pink gentleman laughed mockingly. Just as he was about to chase after Ling Moyin, his expression suddenly changed. Well, who dares to destroy my puppets? The pink gentleman's face was filled with anger. Those 4 puppets had cost him a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. They were very valuable. Thinking of this, the pink gentleman reluctantly looked at Ling Moyin, who was running away, then turned and rushed in another direction. In this place, Yiguchen held the 9-dragon thunder prison in his hand, and 9-colored profound lightning flashed and roared in all directions. During this period of training, his godly sword lightning controlling technique had also evolved to the level of minor accomplishment, and he could now use a small trick. Myriad Thunder Transformation. Yiguchen's sword swept out, and an endless amount of sword qi turned into a rolling wave of thunder and fell on the puppet. In the explosion of the wave of thunder, the puppet's body was charred black and cracked, and it fell to the ground with a plop. Yiguchen turned his head and saw Su Jiqing, whose face was flushed and who was trying her best to suppress the poison gas. He held Su Jiqing's arm and left the place in a flash. Not long after Yiguchen left, the pink gentleman came to the place. Looking at the puppet that was paralyzed on the ground and had almost turned into a lump of black paste, his expression was stern. Who is it? The pink gentleman's face was gloomy. Losing a puppet was a great loss to the pink gentleman. On the other side, Yiguchen found a quiet tomb and inserted a trace of nirvana demonic flame into Su Jiqing's body to remove the poison gas. Young Master Dugu, thank you very much. Jiqing should leave this place now. Su Jiqing felt that she was holding Yiguchen back. Moreover, Su Jiqing had already gained some benefits. If she continued to go deeper, she would inevitably encounter people like Jean Booby, the Pink Gentleman, and the Gold and Silver Blades. Although her strength was not weak, it was obviously not enough to compete with these top dynasties. That's fine. Yiguchen nodded slightly. Young Master Dugu. Will we meet again in the future? Su Jiqing hesitated for a moment. She had a vague feeling that the young man in front of her would definitely have an extraordinary position in the Sword Dynasty in the future. It was her fortune to be able to meet Yiguchen. If there's a chance, I will. Yiguchen smiled faintly. Looking at Yiguchen's attitude, Su Jiqing smiled bitterly. She was regarded as a genius in the Cloud Billow Dynasty and was highly sought after. However, in Yiguchen's eyes, she was so ordinary. After saying goodbye, Su Jiqing left the tomb. Yiguchen continued to go deeper into the tomb. Not long after, Yiguchen heard a familiar voice. If you come again, even if I, Ling Moyin, die, I will definitely bury you with me. This voice, it's her. Yiguchen's eyes flashed with surprise as he heard the voice. Chapter 946. In an empty tomb chamber, Ling Moyin forcibly propped herself up. Her delicate body was trembling slightly. Her face was flushed red, and she looked drunk. She could only bite the tip of her tongue with her teeth to keep herself awake. In front of her, 3 men who looked like bandits were staring at her like hungry wolves. These 3 men were called the Black Wind 3 Bandits. They were all villains at the 9th level of the Spirit Bridge of Heaven and Earth. They were quite famous in the ancient Chaos Wasteland. Beauty, it seems like you're in a bad situation. The leader of the Black Wind 3 Bandits sneered. I'm a Golden Emblem disciple of the Sword Dynasty's Sacred Cliff College. If you Black Wind 3 Bandits dare to attack me, you will die without a burial ground. Ling Moyin gasped for breath. The true energy in her body was being eaten away by the pink poisonous fog. She could not summon any strength. The worst thing was that Ling Moyin felt her body heat up. She wanted to take off her clothes. She knew that the pink poisonous fog was the dirty trick of the pink playboy. If it were any other time, we wouldn't dare to do that. But now, the one who insulted you is the pink playboy, not us. The second leader laughed. After insulting Ling Moyin, they would naturally kill her to silence her. Even if someone investigated later, the crime would only fall on the pink playboy. They would not be able to find out anything. Ling Moyin was furious. She gathered the remaining true energy in her body and attacked with her sword. Don't try to struggle anymore. What was that saying again? Since you can't fight back, you might as well enjoy it. The Black Wind 3 Bandits laughed. The leader raised his hand, took out a sickle, and fought with Ling Moyin. If Ling Moyin was in her peak condition, she would be able to escape easily even if she could not defeat the 3 of them. But now, Ling Moyin was poisoned. Her consciousness was a little blurry, let alone fight. After a few rounds, Ling Moyin's delicate body flew backward and coughed up blood. Ling Moyin clenched her teeth and flipped her sword when she saw the Black Wind 3 Bandits closing in on her. She would rather die than have her chastity sullied. However, at this moment, she realized that she had completely lost her strength, and her mind was a little fuzzy. Looking at the approaching Black Wind 3 Bandits, Ling Moyin's face, which was usually as cold as frost, also carried a trace of heart-wrenching sorrow. Brother, Yin, won't be able to avenge you. Ling Moyin closed her eyes in despair as 2 streams of tears flowed down from the corners of her eyes. In order to avenge her brother, Ling Mo Shu, by defeating Hua Wuxiu with her own hands, Ling Moyin had put in a lot of effort. However, she did not expect that she would fall here. At this moment of despair, Ling Moyin suddenly heard the sound of chaotic fighting, followed by the sound of splattering blood. That was the sound of a sword piercing through flesh. With 3 thuds, the corpses of the Black Wind 3 bandits fell to the ground. Ling Moyin forced herself to open her eyes with the last of her consciousness, only to see a masked man approaching her. You. Don't come over. Or else. I'll die. Ling Moyin's eyes shed tears of humiliation. Are you okay? The masked man took off his mask and looked at Ling Moyin strangely. You. Are. Ling Moyin's consciousness was completely muddled before she could see the person clearly. The person who came to her rescue was naturally Ye Guqin. Ye Guqin shook his head slightly as he looked at Ling Moyin, whose face was flushed and whose eyes were blurred. It seemed that Ling Moyin had also encountered the pink playboy and was poisoned. Thinking of this, Ye Guqin wanted to help Ling Moyin up. Who would have thought that Ling Moyin would take the initiative to stick to Ye Guqin, her slender arms wrapping around Ye Guqin's neck. Ling Moyin, you. Ye Guqin frowned slightly. Ling Moyin was not like Su Jiqing. Su Jiqing's poison had not entered her body, but Ling Moyin's poison had entered her bone marrow. The fastest way to detoxify the poison was to have sex with the opposite sex. This was the pink playboy's plan, but who would have thought that it would be ruined by Ye Guqin? You want me? Ling Moyin's consciousness was blurred at this moment. Her jade-like arms were tightly wrapped around Ye Guqin, and her red lips were close to Ye Guqin's ear. Although Ling Moyin was not a peerless beauty, she had her own charm. If it was someone else, they might not be able to resist Ling Moyin's seductive appearance. But who was Ye Guqin? As the sword demon, his temperament might not be as calm as an old monk, but it was at least as calm as an ancient well. Moreover, he was burdened with guilt towards Su Jianshi and Situ Hongxue, so it was impossible for him to have anything to do with other women. Ye Guqin secretly shook his head and knocked Ling Moyin unconscious with a chop. After that, Ye Guqin found an empty tomb chamber and used his genuine qi and nirvana demonic flame to dispel and refine the poison in Ling Moyin's body. Then, he took out several sage-to-be elixirs and fed them to Ling Moyin. Not long after, Ling Moyin finally woke up. I'm fine. Ling Moyin's eyes were slightly dazed before she suddenly woke up. She hurriedly checked her body and found that there were no signs of humiliation. Only then did she let out a long sigh of relief. Her gaze fell on the figure sitting cross-legged not far away. When she saw that it was Ye Guqin, Ling Moyin was extremely surprised. Dugu Wubai, why are you here? Previously, Ling Moyin's consciousness was in a mess, so she did not know that it was Ye Guqin. Isn't there a 3-person mission for this mission? Ye Guqin said lightly. Ling Moyin was speechless and bit her lip. Even with her cold personality, at this moment, she felt somewhat ashamed and unable to show her face. She and Jiang Yan had deliberately left Ye Guqin behind. Not only did Ye Guqin not resent them, he even saved her. In contrast, Ling Moyin was so ashamed that she wanted to bury her head in the ground. At this moment, she seemed to vaguely remember some scenes from when she was in a daze. She had hooked her arm around Ye Guqin's neck in an ambiguous posture. When she thought of this, Ling Moyin's cheeks instantly felt like they were on fire. She felt even more ashamed and complicated. Ling Moyin wanted to say something, but hesitated. Don't say anything unnecessary. After you've adjusted your breathing, get ready to enter the deepest part of the Great Tomb, Ye Guqin said indifferently. Ling Moyin had mixed feelings. She looked at Ye Guqin with an extremely complicated gaze. You, don't blame me. After all, I treated you like this. Ling Moyin bit her lip. I don't care, Ye Guqin said. Ling Moyin took a deep breath and said sincerely, I'm sorry that I didn't treat you well before. But if you can be down to earth, not so ambitious, and not so arrogant, she really hoped that Ye Guqin could grow up safely in Sacred Cliff College, and not be directly taken away by Tensei College 3 months later. Ye Guqin smiled and didn't say anything. Ling Moyin still didn't believe that he could pass Mount Saint Crossing. Then, 3 months later, she would let the facts prove it. By the way, I'll still wear the mask and hide in the dark, Yiguchin said. Well, that's good too. Ling Moyin agreed. Jean Booby, the gold and silver knives, and pink gentleman were all powerful opponents. It was better for Yiguchin to hide in the dark than to appear directly. Next, Yiguchin put on the mask again and distanced himself from Ling Moyin. He passed through the tomb tunnel and rushed toward the deepest part of the great tomb. Chapter 947. After an hour, Yiguchin and Ling Moyin finally rushed out of the tomb. In the deepest part of the tomb, there was a huge space. Above them was a circular dome with countless modeled murals carved on it, as if it was a depiction of an extremely prosperous ancient dynasty. In this space, there were many bronze knight statues. These bronze knight statues were like terracotta soldiers that were arranged vertically and horizontally. Each bronze knight statue was tall and mighty, and they gave off a murderous aura that made people feel intimidated just by looking at them. At this moment, many figures had gathered in the space. They were all blocked in front of the bronze knight statues, which were like steel walls. However, everyone's gaze was fixed on the deepest part of the bronze knight statues. There was a high platform in the middle, with a weathered body sitting cross-legged on it. Although it had already died, the pressure that was faintly emitted still made everyone's heart palpitate. A false saint expert. Yiguchin, who was wearing a mask, looked in the crowd and murmured in his heart. The corpse was a false saint expert when he was alive. However, the most eye-catching thing was not the corpse itself, but the modeled bronze treasure box that he was protecting with his hands crossed. As long as one was not a fool, one would know that there must be something in the treasure box. It was very likely that it was related to a big secret. According to Su Jiqing, the murals in the tomb here are of the ancient ruined Saint dynasty. Could that false saint corpse also be from the ancient ruined Saint dynasty? What is hidden in the treasure box? Yiguchin thought to himself. On the other side, Ling Moyin walked out of the crowd and saw the geniuses of the various dynasties standing at the front. Jiang Yan was among them. When he saw Ling Moyin, Jiang Yan's expression froze, and then he felt extremely embarrassed. Ling Moyin, you're still alive. How fortunate. Jiang Yan smiled embarrassedly. It's all thanks to you. Ling Moyin's expression was extremely cold. You actually cured me of the mandarin duck powder? On the other side, Pink Gentleman looked at Ling Moyin and was a little surprised. Beside him were 3 pink-robed puppets. The last one had already been destroyed by Yiguchin. Pink Playboy. Ling Moyin's eyes were extremely cold. She could not imagine what would have happened to her if Yiguchin had not saved her. If she was strong enough, Ling Moyin wouldn't mind cutting the Pink Gentleman into 1,000 pieces. Hee, beauty, let's catch up later. The Pink Gentleman smiled frivolously. Now was the time to fight for the key opportunity. Even if Pink Gentleman was obsessed, he would not choose to attack Ling Moyin at this time. These bronze knights should be guardian puppets. None of us can get the treasure box from the false saint corpse alone. Why don't we work together and see who can get it? Jean Huan suggested. None of them had taken the lead previously because they were afraid of the bronze knight puppets. But now that there were more people, if they worked together, they might be able to fight. I think it's possible, Jean Booby said. Although he was domineering and arrogant, he was not a brainless person. If anyone were to attack alone, they would not be able to break through the terracotta army. It's possible. Ling Moyin and Jiang Yan agreed. At the same time, Ling Moyin secretly glanced at Yiguchin, who was in the crowd. The Sword Dynasty seemed to be the weakest, but Yiguchin, who was hiding in the dark, was a hidden killer. Soon, everyone reached an agreement. The other warriors also wanted to join in. Although Jean Booby and the others were strong, they still had a chance. Attack! Jean Booby shouted, and golden light burst out from his body. He was like a golden god of war, and he had a majestic aura. As the 10th on the God of War list and a divine dwelling realm elite, Jean Booby's strength was unquestionable. Pink Gentleman did not attack. Instead, he urged the 3 pink-clothed puppets beside him to attack. As for Pink Gentleman's strength, he had not fully revealed it yet. On the other side, the gold and silver swords attacked at the same time. The light from the swords was domineering and awe-inspiring. Ling Moyin and Jiang Yan also attacked. The other martial practitioners' moves also formed a dazzling brilliance that swept towards the Bronze Knight puppets. Just as everyone attacked, the Bronze Knight puppets that had been sealed for a long time trembled as if they had sensed something. The rust on the surface of their bodies fell off, and ghostly flames burned in their empty eye sockets. "Kill!" a coarse voice rang out. The many Bronze Knight puppets also raised the long spears in their hands and faced the many warriors. Rumble. Powerful true chi rippled in all directions, shaking the entire space. What shocked the warriors was that their attacks could not cause any obvious damage to the Bronze Knight puppets. At most, they could only leave some marks on the surface of the puppets. What powerful puppets! Yi Guqin, who was hidden in the crowd, was also surprised. The ancient ruins Tianqing dynasty was able to create such powerful puppets. The puppets had been weathered by time, and their combat strength had obviously fallen to the bottom. Even so, they still had such strength. It was hard to imagine how strong the puppets were when they were in their heyday. Soon, the entire space was filled with a rain of blood. Puchi. Some of the weaker warriors were directly pierced by the spears in the hands of the Bronze Knight puppets, and blood spurted out. Of course, there were also some puppets that were too corroded, and they were destroyed by the warriors. However, other than the warriors who were held back by the Bronze Knight puppets, most of the warriors were desperately rushing toward the false saint corpse. They knew that it was impossible to destroy all the Bronze Knight puppets. Therefore, they had to seize the opportunity to seize the treasure box in the false saint corpse's hands. "Get out of the way!" Jean Booby shouted angrily. The golden spear in his hand collided with the spear in the hands of a Bronze Knight puppet in front of him, and the sound of metal clashing rang out. His attack was powerful, and it directly shook the puppet away. The gold and silver swords worked together, and the saber radiance swept out, opening a path. The 3 puppets around Pink Playboy cleared the obstacles in front of him, and he flashed toward the false saint corpse. Although Ling Moyin hated Jiang Yan's actions, she could only join forces with him and rush toward the false saint corpse. As for Yi Guqin, he flashed and secretly observed, looking for an opportunity to strike. Boom! There was a loud explosion, and Jean Booby was the first to rush out of the encirclement. Without any hesitation, he directly reached for the treasure box in the false saint corpse's hands. "Don't even think about it." Jin Huan and Yin Gu's swords swept out, and saber radiance slashed out to block Jean Booby's attack. "This treasure is mine." Pink Playboy rushed over. His 3 pink-clothed puppets were riddled with holes, and they were close to being scrapped. After such a loss, Pink Playboy felt like vomiting blood if he still couldn't get the treasure box. He raised his hand, and his divine dwelling realm cultivation erupted, and a pink stream of genuine chi burst out. Ling Moyin and Jiang Yan also broke out of the encirclement. When they saw the situation, they couldn't help but make their moves. The terrifying attack directly hit the false saint's corpse. The corpse trembled violently, and the treasure box in its hands was sent flying by the attack. Then, it exploded in front of everyone's eyes. Everyone's eyes were fixed on it at this moment. Everyone held their breaths at this moment. What was in the treasure box? Chapter 948. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the treasure box that had exploded. After all, the treasure box had belonged to the false saint. Who knew what kind of rare treasures were in it? However, to everyone's surprise, what flew out of the treasure box was not a rare treasure, but a scroll. The ancient scroll was shaken by the fluctuation of true energy, and it immediately scattered, splitting into 4 parts in the air. Some sharp-eyed people saw some vague patterns drawn on the scroll. Could that be a map? Some people could not help but exclaim. What was in the treasure box of the false saint's corpse was a map. But soon after, everyone's eyes were filled with an incomparably heated expression. Obviously, the the map was not that simple. Could it be? Jin Huan and Yin Gu looked at each other and saw the excitement in each other's eyes. They had vaguely heard that this place might hold the secret of the lost dynasty. This was the reason why the Tyrant Saber dynasty had sent them here. However, they were not sure when they arrived. Now, they did not expect it to be true. At the same time, Pink Playboy, Jean Booby, Ling Moyin, Jiang Yan, and the others reacted. Even if it was just a map, there must be a big secret recorded on it. Boom! Jean Booby raised his hand and reached out to grab the map that had been divided into 4 parts. I'm also interested in this map. Pink Playboy also reached out to grab it. Regardless of whether he could use the map or not, he would be rewarded handsomely if he gave it to the Mara dynasty. The Sword dynasty wants this map. Ling Moyin and Jiang Yan also reached out to grab it. The rest of the martial artists also had a fierce look on their faces. No one could resist such an opportunity. Regardless of whether they could get it in the end, they had to at least try. If the map was really related to the ancient ruined Celestial Saint dynasty, they would be rich. Yi Guqin, who was wearing a mask, looked at the geniuses who were fiercely fighting for the 4 map fragments. He frowned and looked for an opportunity to strike. At that moment, Su Qingyu's voice rang in his mind again. That false saint's corpse is something, oh. Yi Guqin's expression changed as he looked at the false saint's corpse. Although it was attacked, the false saint's corpse did not disintegrate. Because everyone's attention was on the 4 maps, not many people paid attention to the false sacred corpse. Yi Guqin used so near, yet poles apart, and almost instantly flashed to the side of the corpse. His eyes flashed as he saw a key-like object hidden in the shriveled hand of the corpse. The key was obviously not the key to the treasure box. Yi Guqin directly put the key into his bag. At this time, Su Qingyu said in his mind, there may be a soul crystal in the brain of this fake saint corpse. What? There's actually a soul crystal. Yi Guqin's expression froze slightly, revealing a trace of joy. Yi Guqin hadn't forgotten that if he wanted to restore his spiritual sea, there were only 2 ways. One was to refine saint medicines that nourished the soul, and the other was to refine soul crystals. This was also the reason why Yi Guqin had come to complete the quest. However, he didn't expect that there would be a soul crystal in this fake saint corpse. Sorry to offend you. Yi Guqin whispered in his heart, and then directly hit the head of the fake saint with his palm. Although he didn't want to offend the corpse of his predecessor, he was determined to get the soul crystal. Boom! Yi Guqin unleashed the power of his physical body and smashed the head into pieces with a single palm strike. Then, he saw some diamond-like crystals that were almost transparent. Yi Guqin could feel the strong soul fluctuations coming from those crystals. Without hesitation, Yi Guqin put these soul crystals into his origin ring. It's a soul crystal. Some warriors also turned their eyes to Yi Guqin. Soul crystals were very special. Ordinary people didn't particularly need them, but for those who cultivated soul power or whose spiritual sea was damaged, they were priceless treasures. At present, although most people were fighting for the 4 map fragments, a small number of people still noticed Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin snorted coldly and waited with rapt attention. Kid, hand over the soul crystal. Some warriors couldn't hold back and directly attacked Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin's eyes were cold, and his fingertips spat out the sword chi of the 6-pulse divine sword. His body flashed, and flowers of blood floated up. He's a tough nut to crack. Some warriors' faces changed slightly, and they quickly retreated. Although the soul crystal was precious, not everyone needed it. After seeing Yi Guqin's strength, the rest of the warriors were fearful and didn't dare to attack. On the other side, Jean Booby and the Pink Gentleman each obtained a map fragment. There were only 2 map fragments left, and the battle was still intense. We must get a share. Jin Huan and Yin Gu's faces were filled with determination. Damn it, even if we get the map fragments, we can't get out. Jiang Yan's face was ugly. He had underestimated the difficulty of this quest. The higher-ups didn't send 3 gold emblem disciples for no reason. It's all because of you. Ling Moyin was now extremely disgusted with Jiang Yan. Heh. You didn't object, did you? Moreover, what's the use of that Dugu Wubai coming? In this situation, he can't do anything even if he comes. Jiang Yan sneered. Ling Moyin stopped talking, and she looked at Yi Guqin from the corner of her eyes. Yi Guqin was still hiding. The pink gentleman raised his hand and reached out. Then, he grabbed another piece of the map. Pink gentleman, that's enough. The rest of the people wouldn't let the pink gentleman get his hands on it. The pink gentleman's mind moved, and the 3 puppets that were about to be scrapped appeared again, blocking the attacks of the rest of the people. Ha, it's mine now. The pink playboy smiled. Now's the time. On the other side, Yi Guqin's eyes were as sharp as a sword. He had been waiting for this opportunity. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, Yi Guqin's figure was as graceful as a swan, and the 9-dragon thunder prison in his hand flashed. The true chi in his body exploded, and he no longer hid it. The sword swept across, and the moon and stars appeared at the same time. A river of stars accompanied by a crescent moon swept toward the pink gentleman. It was the combination of the Star Destroyer Absolute Sword and the Moon Absolute Sword, the reversal of stars and moon. Oh, no! The pink gentleman's expression suddenly changed just as he was about to grab the map fragment. The sharp sword chi made all the hair on his body stand on end. 6 Desires Demonic Palm. The pink gentleman hurriedly turned around to block. He reached out with one hand, and pink true chi burst out. However, the pink gentleman was in a hurry. How could he compare to Yi Guqin's attack? Puchi! A severed palm flew out, and blood spurted out. The pink gentleman also spat out blood. He was injured in one move. Although he was a divine dwelling expert, Yi Guqin's full-strength attack was enough to injure a divine dwelling expert. Yi Guqin seized the opportunity to grab the map fragment. This scene was beyond everyone's expectations. No one expected that the pink gentleman, one of the heaven prides with the highest cultivation, would be injured by a masked man, and even lose his palm. Even the pink gentleman himself had a dumbfounded look on his face. The intense pain caused his devilish face to contort. Yi Guqin did not hesitate. After grabbing the map fragment, he seized the opportunity to grab the last unowned map fragment. If he could get it, Yi Guqin would have 2 map fragments. Don't even think about it. Jean Booby and the gold and silver blades also reacted and were about to attack. Thunder Dragon Purgatory. Yi Guqin activated the Thunder Dragon Soul in the 9-dragon thunder prison, turning the surrounding space into a thunder prison to block the attacks of Jean Booby and the gold and silver blades. He stretched out his hand and grabbed the last map fragment. He did it. Ling Moyin's heart trembled. She did not expect that Yi Guqin would strike like a thunderbolt when he did not make a move. But at this moment, a flying sword streaked across the sky, forcibly tearing through the Thunder Dragon Purgatory, and shot toward Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin's eyes sharpened. He turned around and stabbed out with his sword, colliding with the flying sword. Good chance. Jin Huan and Yin Gu saw this, and the gold and silver blades combined to break through the lightning and grab the last map fragment. Seeing this scene, Yi Guqin felt a little angry even though he had a strong temperament. His eyes were cold, and he looked at the figure in the distance. It's you, Ouyang Fengyun. Ling Moyin looked at the man in white, and her face darkened. She was extremely angry. Chapter 949. This was Yi Guqin's original plan. If he were to make a sudden move like this, he would be able to seize the 2 map fragments at once. However, Yi Guqin missed the opportunity to snatch the flying sword. In the end, he only managed to obtain 1 incomplete map. The gold and silver blades weren't weak. Since they had obtained the incomplete map, it would be difficult to kill them and snatch it back. Not to mention that Jean Booby and Pink Playboy were still eyeing him. Yi Guqin narrowed his eyes and looked at the white-clothed man who had a dignified appearance. At this moment, this sudden situation caused everyone to be stunned, and their faces were stunned. Most people's gazes were still focused on Yiguchin. Were you the one who destroyed my puppet as well? The pink playboy held his broken hand and stared at Yiguchin with an extremely cold and vicious gaze. Who are you? Jean Booby asked in a deep voice. Jin Huan and Yin Gu also stared at Yiguchin. Let me tell you. He's the sword demon Dugu Wubai who rose to fame in the sword dynasty. He's ranked 10th on the sword leaderboard, the white-clothed man, Ouyang Fengyun, said calmly. What? Dugu Wubai. Could it be that Dugu Wubai? I reckon that's the case. I've also heard that the weapon in his hand should be a quasi-heavenly tribulation divine weapon, the 9-dragon lightning prison. Hearing Ouyang Fengyun's words, the surrounding cultivators suddenly understood. Although the sword demon's name hadn't spread throughout the sword dynasty, it had started to spread outside of the sword dynasty. So he's ranked 10th on the sword leaderboard. No wonder. Jean Booby and the others also reacted. Yiguchin slowly raised his hand and took off his mask, revealing a pair of cold eyes. He actually followed us here. Jiang Yan was a little stunned. He didn't expect Yiguchin to appear here and even snatch an incomplete map. But even so, the current crisis had not been resolved, and Jiang Yan did not believe that Yiguchin had the ability to retreat safely. Ouyang Fengyun, what are you doing? Ling Moin gritted her teeth and stared coldly at Ouyang Fengyun. Although Ouyang Fengyun wasn't a student of Sacred Cliff College, he was still a member of the Sword Dynasty. Yiguchin would have been able to obtain 2 pieces of the map if he hadn't interfered just now. Ouyang Fengyun narrowed his eyes and said in a cold voice, You were the one who schemed against my little brother and made him fail to break through to the divine dwelling stage? I didn't deliberately frame you. Yiguchin's expression was indifferent. I don't believe it. Ouyang Fengyun's tone sank. Whether you believe it or not, what does that have to do with me? Yiguchin said indifferently. How could he not know that Ouyang Fengyun was just looking for an excuse to attack him? As for the reason, apart from helping Ouyang Tianji, the main reason was most likely to be the divine weapon in Yiguchin's hands. Hand over the 9-dragon thunder prison as compensation. Ouyang Fengyun said indifferently as if it was only natural. As expected. Yiguchin sneered. His guess was pretty close. Looking at the 2 people who were at each other's throats, many of the surrounding warriors were stunned. At such a critical juncture, the 9th and 10th ranked on the Sword Dynasty's sword ranking were actually fighting amongst themselves. The Sword Dynasty is actually fighting amongst themselves, interesting. Jin Huan and Yin Gu both breathed a sigh of relief inside after obtaining a piece of the map. Their gazes towards Ouyang Fengyun and Yiguchin were filled with mockery. The scene of the 2 fighting was similar to what was happening in the Sword Dynasty. Unaffiliated cultivators and aristocratic families were fighting amongst each other, causing internal strife. Ouyang Fengyun, that's enough. Ling Moin's expression was extremely cold. As for Jiang Yan, his expression changed, but he didn't step forward. No matter what, the map fragment in your hands can only belong to me. Jean Booby directly attacked. Let's go too. Jin Huan and Yin Gu also attacked. On the other side, Pink Playboy stared at Yiguchin with a sinister gaze. He was clearly waiting for an opportunity to attack. Since you don't know what's good for you, then don't blame me for not showing you any mercy. Ouyang Fengyun's aura of the first layer of the divine dwelling stage erupted. Extremely vigorous true qi surged out and vaguely condensed into the shape of a dragon and tiger on the surface of his body. Be careful, that's the Ouyang family's emperor-grade cultivation technique, the Great Dragon Tiger True Qi cultivated from the Dragon Tiger's secret manual. Ling Moin shouted. Heterogeneous True Qi. Yiguchin was slightly surprised. Most of the heterogeneous real qi came from the cultivation of a special cultivation method. For example, Yiguchin's golden real qi was a heterogeneous real qi. However, Ouyang Fengyun's Great Dragon Tiger True Qi wasn't that simple. Brave Tiger Seal. Ouyang Fengyun struck out with his palm. The genuine chi on the surface of his body condensed into a ferocious tiger. It charged toward Yiguchen with a mighty momentum. Yiguchen flicked his finger and the six-pulse divine sword swept out, piercing through the tiger. Ouyang Fengyun frowned slightly. He was clearly surprised by Yiguchen's strength. Although Yiguchen was at the 5th level of the heaven and earth spiritual bridge, the density of his true chi wasn't any weaker than Ouyang Fengyun, who was at the 1st layer of the divine dwelling stage. Severing dragon palm. Ouyang Fengyun stepped out and blasted out another palm. Dragon-shaped true chi swirled out from his body and turned into a giant true chi dragon, charging towards Yiguchen. Since you're also a genius on the sword list, use your sword. Forget about these little tricks. Yiguchen's black hair fluttered in the wind. With a cold shout, the 9-dragon thunder prison swept out and beheaded the giant true chi dragon. Oh, sword demon Duga Wubai, you're indeed as arrogant as the rumors say. Since that's the case, I'll show you my strength. Ouyang Fengyun's cold eyes flashed as he raised his hand. The flying sword he was standing on soared into the sky, emitting a buzzing sound that sounded like a dragon's roar. Cloud Dragon Sword, kill! Ouyang Fengyun held the Cloud Dragon Sword and clashed with Yiguchen, causing a violent buzzing sound. Around them, the other geniuses were also engaged in a chaotic battle, all of them wanting to obtain the incomplete map. The gold and silver blades were engaged in a fierce battle with Zhan Bubi. Ling Moyin and Jiang Yan were restraining the injured pink playboy. Star-breaking sword. Yiguchen's sword radiance swept out and turned into a river of stars. Ouyang Fengyun held the Cloud Dragon Sword, and his body suddenly became misty. Yiguchen's sword momentum was quietly dissolved when it landed. That's the Cloud Sword Principle. Yiguchen's eyes narrowed. The Cloud Sword Principle was only an ordinary sword principle. However, its characteristics were like misty clouds. Because of that, it was quite difficult to deal with. Dragon Swimming Sword Technique, Dragon Swimming in 4 directions. Ouyang Fengyun's sword moves changed. The bright sword radiance spread out like a dragon, and it was extremely agile. It surrounded Yiguchen from all directions. Moon-breaking sword. Yiguchen turned the tip of his sword, and the sword radiance turned into a magnificent crescent moon. It collided with Ouyang Fengyun's sword move, and the sonorous sound of the waves shook everyone's eardrums. A strong wave of true chi rushed over. Yiguchen's body shook, and he dissolved it. He took a step forward and stabbed Ouyang Fengyun's head with a backhand move. God-slaying sword technique, Permitha. The sword aura turned into a series of beautiful and dazzling Permitha flowers, bringing with it the smell of death. Cloud Sword Principle, Cloud Mountain and Fog Sea. Ouyang Fengyun used the Cloud Sword Principle's sword domain, Cloud Mountain and Fog Sea. In an instant, the sword aura turned into waves of fog, as if forming a foggy domain, enveloping Yiguchen. Endless sword aura penetrated Yiguchen from all directions. Yiguchen raised his cold eyebrows, and his pitch-black eyes were drowned in the color of blood. A terrifying blood-red sword aura gushed out of his body, turning into a sea of blood, and rushed in all directions. Azura Blood Sea, 18 layers. Break. Yiguchen used the Azura Sword Principle's domain, and it shook all directions. Chapter 950. Although Ouyang Fengyun's sword principle domain was extremely difficult to deal with, it was only an ordinary sword principle after all. However, Yiguchen's Azura sword principle was a peerless sword principle. The violent sword intent turned into a blood-red tide that swept in all directions, directly dispersing the surrounding cloud domain. The blood-red 18 layers of hell rose from the ground and suppressed Ouyang Fengyun. Azura sword principle. Ouyang Fengyun looked serious. He seemed to be disdainful of Yiguchen, but he was very vigilant in his heart. Although the Sword Principle Alliance's Sword Principle ranking was not absolutely accurate, it was more or less the same. Therefore, Ouyang Fengyun did not look down on Yiguchen too much in his heart. It was just that he was confident that he could suppress Yiguchen. But now, After the real fight, he realized how powerful Yiguchin was. Dragon swimming sword technique, dragon roaring in the 9 heavens. Ouyang Fengyun held the cloud dragon's sword in his hand, and the sword tip vibrated. The surrounding cloud domain changed, and cloud dragons roared out. Every cloud dragon seemed to contain endless sword chi. The dragons roared and rushed towards Yiguchin. Yiguchin finally understood why Ouyang Fengyun was so obsessed with his 9-dragon thunder prison. It was because Ouyang Fengyun's cultivation technique was slightly compatible with the 9-dragon thunder prison. If he could obtain the 9-dragon thunder prison, Ouyang Fengyun's strength would rise to another level. But unfortunately, Yiguchin would not give Ouyang Fengyun this opportunity. Divine Sword Lightning Controlling Art, Myriad Thunder Transformation. Yiguchin's vigorous golden true chi poured into the 9-dragon thunder prison sword. The quasi-tribulation divine weapon's power was stimulated to the extreme in an instant. 9-colored lightning wrapped around the sword tip and burst out, spreading in all directions. Rumble. In the void, the sword radiance and lightning exploded, and the dragon roared. Violent vibrations spread in all directions, and even some of the heavy bronze night puppets were sent flying. What a powerful fluctuation! Jean Booby, the gold and silver blades, Pink Gentleman, and the others were all shocked by the shockwaves from their battle. It's a good thing that Ouyang Fengyun and Dugu Wubai are fighting among themselves. Otherwise, if they joined forces, we wouldn't have a good time. Jin Huan and Yin Gu rejoiced. If the two joined forces, they might not be able to bring the map with them. Damn it. On the other hand, Ling Moyin's heart was gnashing her teeth. As long as they could bring the map with them, their mission would. However, Ouyang Fengyun had stirred up trouble from the inside. She had turned against Yiguchin and held him back. You can't blame Ouyang Fengyun. If Dugu Wubai had obediently handed over the 9-dragon thunder prison, things might not have turned out like this, Jiang Yan said, curling his lips. Humph. Ling Moyin also coldly glanced at Jiang Yan. She had seen through his character. Jiang Yan's expression was a little unnatural, and he didn't say anything else. Bang! Another collision. Yiguchin and Ouyang Fengyun were both pushed back at the same time. Yiguchin's arm was a little sore, but he didn't fall into a disadvantage in the battle with Ouyang Fengyun. Back then, the divine dwelling stage was an existence that Yiguchin couldn't resist. In the battle with Gu Xiaoyang, who was at the 3rd layer of the divine dwelling stage, Yiguchin had almost risked his life. But now, the divine dwelling stage was just a little troublesome for Yiguchin, and it was far from the point where he had to risk his life. On the other side, Ouyang Fengyun's face grew more and more serious. What a powerful physical body, how did this boy cultivate? Ouyang Fengyun found that he couldn't do anything to Yiguchin in a short period of time. His powerful physical defense, the Azura Sword Dao, and the 9-dragon thunder prison made Yiguchin an incomparably troublesome existence. Rumble. The bronze night puppets changed again. The ghost fire in their empty eye sockets turned a glaring blood red, as though they had entered a berserk state. Not good, these bronze night puppets seemed to have gone berserk. The faces of some cultivators changed abruptly, and they hurriedly retreated. But there were still some cultivators who couldn't escape in time, and their bodies were pierced by the spears of the berserk puppets. Even Yiguchin and Ouyang Fengyun were affected. Retreat. At this moment, everyone temporarily restrained their fighting spirit. The most important thing now was to escape from the great tomb. Yiguchin's figure seemed to be shuttling through the void as he dashed out of the great tomb. So fast. Seeing Yiguchin's speed, Ouyang Fengyun's expression grew even more serious. He faintly felt that he had made a wrong decision. But in an instant, this thought was thrown to the back of his mind. Everyone in the great tomb dashed out of the great tomb. Not long after figure shot out from the mine in the wasteland. Compared to the number of people who had rushed in, the number of people who had escaped was less than half. Yiguchin's figure also flashed out. He didn't stop in the slightest and continued to dash into the distance. Don't go. Ouyang Fengyun, Jean Bubi, Pink Gentleman, the Gold and Silver Blades, Ling Moyin, and Jiang Yan all followed closely behind. There were also some martial artists who wanted to watch the show, and they also followed. They all wanted to know how Ye Guqin was going to escape now. In front, Ye Guqin's expression was calm. Even though he was targeted by so many people, there was still no trace of fear in his eyes. If I go all out, I'll definitely teach them an unforgettable lesson. Ye Guqin's eyes were cold. He weighed the gains and losses in his heart, whether he should go all out. At this moment, Ye Guqin's expression suddenly froze. He stopped in his tracks and stared intently at the sky in front of him. A sense of threat welled up in his heart. Hey, why did that Dugu Wubai stop running? Could it be that he knows he can't escape? Seeing that Ye Guqin had stopped in his tracks, some cultivators were surprised. Dugu Wubai, have you accepted your fate? Ouyang Fengyun said lightly when he saw that Ye Guqin had stopped in his tracks. On the other side, Jean Bubi and the others also stopped in their tracks. Ye Guqin ignored them and continued to stare at the sky. A jet-black flowing light came from the sky. What is that? Everyone finally noticed the unusual phenomenon, and their eyes immediately hardened. The flowing light finally stopped in the sky. The brilliance dissipated, and an extremely cold figure with an extremely bloody and murderous aura appeared in front of everyone's eyes. At this moment, everyone's breathing seemed to have stopped. This was because the dark, cold, and bloody aura that the figure exuded was too strong. Some of the martial artists with lower cultivations were even more frightened. That figure was a woman wearing a pitifully small amount of black armor. No, it should be pieces of armor that only protected some important parts of her body, leaving a large area of snow-white skin exposed. Her ash-gray hair fluttered slightly, and half of her face was covered by a mask that covered her eyes and nose. Only her fiery red lips and snow-white sharp chin were exposed. Her figure was extremely slender, and her breasts were towering. Her snow-white waist was exposed, and her legs were long and straight. Looking at this figure, everyone's heart felt like it had fallen into an ice cave. Hand over what you obtained in the Great Tomb, or else. The woman's voice paused, and she took out an extremely hideous black sickle. Die! The woman held the black sickle and pointed it at Ye Guqin and the others. She was as cold as the Grim Reaper from hell. Second on the blood ranking of the Maro dynasty, Princess Luo Ho. Ye Guqin's eyes narrowed. Chapter 951. Before Ye Guqin came, he had learned about the heaven prides of the various dynasties. The blood ranking of the Mola dynasty was equivalent to the sword ranking of the Sword dynasty. Apart from having great talent and strength, the requirement to enter the blood ranking was to carve out a bloody path. The heaven prides that could enter the blood ranking all had their hands stained with blood and were infamous for their ferocity. Princess Luo Ho was the princess of the Mola dynasty and also an executioner whose hands were stained with the blood of countless people. Generally speaking, the temperament of a princess was either noble or charming, like Princess Fengxi. But Princess Luo Ho was famous for her slaughter and had the Luo Ho fate. Some heaven prides were born with a fate that was compatible with some stars and could use the power of the stars to cultivate. Just like Gu Zun's 7-kill fate. The Luo Ho fate was the same. Luo Ho was a demonic star. Thinking about it this way, it wasn't surprising that Princess Luo Ho had such a cold and bloodthirsty personality. Princess Luo Ho, she's actually here. Pink Gentleman was surprised. Although he was ranked 7th on the blood ranking, he was much weaker than Princess Luo Ho in terms of both status and strength. Princess Luo Ho. Jin Huan and Yin Gu's faces were extremely grave. Even the arrogant Jean Bubi was on high alert at this moment with extreme fear in his eyes. The second on the blood ranking was too high, and her strength was almost comparable to the top heaven prides of the overlord forces. At least the third level of the divine palace. Ye Guqin muttered to himself as he looked at Princess Luo Ho. The pressure that Princess Luo Ho gave him was similar to when he faced Gu Xiaoyang. This meant that Princess Luoho's strength was at least at the third level of the Divine Palace, which was indeed stronger than ordinary heaven prides. And a quasi-tribulation divine weapon? Yiguchen's eyes flashed as he looked at the black scythe in Princess Luoho's hand. Princess Luoho was powerful not only because of her strength, but also because of her quasi-tribulation divine weapon, the Death Scythe. Looking at everyone who was on high alert, Princess Luoho's bright red lips curved into an incomparably cold arc. She slowly raised the Death Scythe in her hand, and a terrifying pressure swept out. Her true chi was pure black in color, like a pitch-black demonic wind, spreading in all directions. Everyone present felt their hearts palpitating. Yiguchen gripped the nine-dragon thunder prison with a solemn expression. Princess Luoho's strength might be even stronger than Jean Bubi, the pink gentleman, and the others combined. Just as the atmosphere was about to become suffocating, a streak of golden light flew over from afar. Princess Luoho, you actually want to kill him again? Accompanied by the golden light, a figure appeared in a flash. As the light dissipated, a young monk dressed in plain clothes appeared. The monk did not have an inch of hair on his head. His face was upright and delicate, and his skin was faintly glowing with a golden light. He looked rather dignified. How annoying! Princess Luoho's lips curled into a cold smile as she swung her sickle at the monk. The young monk raised his hand and activated his genuine chi. A beam of golden light shot into the sky. It was a golden longsword that had yet to be sharpened. The body of the sword was engraved with countless golden Buddhist scriptures. With a loud clanging sound, violent ripples spread out in all directions. Could that person be the sword monk Xuanlian? Yiguchen was surprised. The sword monk Xuanlian was ranked 4th on the sword leaderboard. He seemed slightly weaker than Princess Luoho. However, his special Buddhist genuine chi was effective against Princess Luoho's dark genuine chi. Great thunderclap sword technique. Xuanlian's sword aura swept out. As the blade vibrated, it sounded like thunder. His Buddhist chanting was like thunder. Boom! 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 Continuous explosions of sword chi could be heard. Princess Luoho could not do anything to Xuanlian for the time being. Stinky bald donkey, just you wait. Although Princess Luoho was not afraid of Xuanlian, with Xuanlian around, she could not free herself to deal with Yiguchen and the others. She thought for a moment and decided that instead of being entangled, she might as well leave for now. Seeing that Princess Luoho had retreated, the pink gentleman also hurriedly retreated. Jean Bubi looked at Xuanlian fearfully and also retreated quickly. The gold and silver sabers did the same. In an instant, all the martial artists scattered like birds and beasts. Yiguchen frowned slightly, but he did not chase after them. Now that the map was divided into 4 parts, even if Yiguchen found another one, it would not be very effective. Are you all alright? Xuanlian walked over with a faint smile. Greetings, senior brother Xuanlian. Ling Moyin and Jiang Yan cupped their fists and greeted him. Xuanlian nodded slightly and looked at Yiguchen. You must be brother Dugu. Thank you for taking care of junior brother. The junior brother that Xuanlian was referring to was naturally Kong Kong. It's nothing. Thank you, brother Xuanlian, for helping us out this time, Yiguchen said with a faint smile. If he had not interfered, we could have gotten 2 parts of the map. Ling Moyin looked at Ouyang Fengyun. Ouyang Fengyun didn't have a pleasant expression either. Even without Xuanlian, it would be difficult for him to suppress Yiguchen, let alone Xuanlian. Dugu Wubai, don't be complacent. There are less than 2 months before we pass Mount Tongsheng. I'd like to see how embarrassed you will be when the time comes. Ouyang Fengyun did not want to stay any longer and left on his flying sword. Ouyang Fengyun, I will remember what happened today, Yiguchen said lightly. Since he had chosen to attack Yiguchen, he had to be prepared to bear the consequences. You'd better pray for yourself at Mount Tongsheng. Ouyang Fengyun left on his flying sword. The ancient chaos wasteland is not a good place. Since you have gained something, you should leave quickly. Let's talk as we go, Xuanlian said. Okay. Yi Guqin and others nodded slightly. Then, Xuanlian, Yi Guqin, Ling Moyin, and Jiang Yan left the ancient chaos wasteland at a very fast speed. Yi Guqin was the one who gained the most from this task. 1,000-year mica, 10,000-year mica, mica spirit containing saliva, 9 nirvana pills, many sage-to-be pills, treasure pills, some divine weapon fragments, the spirit crystal of the false saint, and most importantly, the incomplete map and the key in the false saint's hand. On the way back, Yi Guqin also learned about it. The hell-level task that Xuanlian received was to track down Princess Luoho. With her strength as the second on the blood ranking, it was indeed a hell-level task. On the way, Yi Guqin did not ask Xuanlian about the sword sect and Kong Kong. He planned to ask in private after returning to the college. Then, Yi Guqin, Xuanlian, and others also went all the way back to Sacred Cliff College. On the other side, Princess Luoho found Pink Playboy. Hand it over, Princess Luoho said coldly. Princess. Pink Playboy lowered his head slightly, a little unwilling. Princess Luoho's delicate body was only covered by a few pieces of armor, looking sexy and seductive. With Pink Playboy's personality, he would definitely not be able to hold back. But now he lowered his head slightly, not even daring to look at Princess Luoho directly, showing how fierce Princess Luoho was. Hand over the map, and the dynasty will compensate you, Princess Luoho said coldly. Thank you, Princess. Although Pink Playboy was unwilling, he also knew that this incomplete map contained a big secret that could even affect the dynasty. It was not something that he could handle alone. Princess, what secret is hidden in this incomplete map? Pink Playboy was really curious. Princess Luoho took the incomplete map and said calmly, a lost dynasty might appear in the world. Pink Playboy nodded slightly and said, Your Highness, I have a presumptuous request. That Dugu Wubai cut off my hand, so I want him to suffer a fate worse than death. Pink Playboy's heart was filled with endless hatred when he thought of Yi Guqin. It was the first time that someone had made him suffer such a big loss. Since he's a prodigy on the sword ranking, you'll naturally have a chance to take revenge in the future. Princess Luoho said coldly. Chapter 952. After a few days, Yi Guqin and the others returned to Sacred Cliff College. To their surprise, Bei Xian Elder and many other elders were there. Even Great Elder Ime was waiting at the entrance of the Divine Cliff Grotto Heaven. What's going on? Yi Guqin was slightly surprised. Completing a difficult level mission shouldn't be so grand, right? Ling Moyin and Jiang Yan were also stunned. Not to mention difficult level missions, even if they had completed a hell level mission, it shouldn't have startled someone like Great Elder Ime. Did you get the map fragment? Great Elder Ime asked. There was even a hint of urgency in his voice. We only got a quarter of it. Yi Guqin took out the map fragment. As for the key he got from the fake sage, Yi Guqin thought for a while and didn't hand it over. Great Elder Ime took the map fragment. His hands were trembling slightly. He looked at Yi Guqin and the others and said, although this mission is difficult level, in terms of difficulty and rewards, it can be considered a hell level mission. Go to the mission hall later and you'll be rewarded according to your contributions. Yi Guqin was surprised. He didn't expect this to be the result. It seems that this map fragment is more valuable than I thought. It might be related to a great opportunity or a great secret, Yi Guqin muttered to himself. However, this was a good thing for him. He didn't have to do other missions. Yi Guqin could get a sacred level medicine just by completing this hell level mission. I heard that you left our young friend Dugu behind and went on a mission alone, right? Bei Xian Elder looked at Jiang Yan and Ling Moyin. Ling Moyin lowered her head and bit her lip. Jiang Yan's expression froze. He hurriedly explained, Elder, we did it for his sake. After all, this difficult level mission is very dangerous. Humph, if it weren't for our young friend Dugu, I'm afraid you wouldn't even be able to bring back a quarter of the map. Bei Xian Elder said coldly. Jiang Yan lowered his head like a frozen eggplant and clenched his fists tightly. Yi Guchen was indeed the one who had completed the mission this time. If there were only the two of them, it would be a problem whether they could return safely. Bei Xian Elder waved his hand and said, "All right, when we go to the mission hall later, you will be rewarded according to your contributions." Big brother Dugu, and eldest senior brother. A little bald head popped out from the crowd. It appeared out of thin air. Little junior brother. Xuanlian smiled faintly. On the other side, Yi Guchen felt a cold gaze fall on him. He looked over and saw that Ouyang Tianji was also among the crowd. Humph. Ouyang Tianji snorted coldly when he saw Yi Guchen looking over. His expression was a little ugly. He didn't expect that even Ouyang Fengyun couldn't do anything to Yi Guchen. Yi Guchen's lips curled into a cold smile. If he had the chance, he wouldn't mind teaching Ouyang Tianji a lesson that he wouldn't forget. After obtaining the map fragments, Great Elder Imei and the others hurriedly left. The gazes of the surrounding Divine Cliff Academy's disciples towards Yi Guchen could not help but contain a faint trace of reverence. It was Yi Guchen's first mission, and he had completed a hell-level mission. This was the best proof of his strength. No one would think that Yi Guchen's 10th place on the sword leaderboard was fake. After that, Yi Guchen and the others went to the mission hall to receive their rewards. An elder from the mission hall personally announced the rewards to Yi Guchen and the others. Dugu Wubai, since you were the one who led this mission, you will receive the reward of a hell-level mission. The elder looked at Yi Guchen warmly. I would like to choose a sacred herb that can nourish the soul, Yi Guchen said with his hands folded. Sure. The elder nodded slightly. Although the sacred herb of the soul was precious, the map fragments that Yi Guchen brought back were even more priceless. There was no comparison between the two. Then, elder, what about us? Jiang Yan was also looking forward to it. That was the reward of a hell-level mission. You. Humph, you were conceited and even abandoned your teammates. Ling Moyin, you can only receive the reward of a difficult level mission. As for you, Jiang Yan, you abandoned your teammates, so your reward will be halved again. The elder said coldly. This. Jiang Yan's expression froze, and his body trembled. When reporting the mission, Jiang Yan naturally reported that he abandoned Ling Moyin in front of the pink playboy. Sacred Cliff College had always been disgusted by such behavior of abandoning teammates. The reward of a difficult level mission was halved, so it was at most a little higher than the reward of an ordinary mission. Jiang Yan clenched his fists. No matter how unwilling he was, he could only swallow it. Ling Moyin didn't refute anything. She just smiled self-deprecatingly. This was indeed what she deserved. If she hadn't agreed with Jiang Yan and abandoned Yi Guchen's suggestion, perhaps she would also be able to enjoy the reward of a hell-level mission. It could only be said that she reaped what she sowed. Next, Yi Guchen went to pick a sacred herb of the soul called the ethereal soul fruit. The ethereal soul fruit was considered rare even among sacred herbs. It could be considered a mid-grade sacred herb. If Yi Guchen hadn't brought back the map fragment this time, he would have only been able to obtain an inferior grade sacred herb in an ordinary hell-level mission. With the ethereal soul fruit and the spirit crystal of a false saint, my sea of knowledge can be completely restored. By then, my cultivation speed will be completely restored. Yi Guchen's heart trembled slightly. There were less than 2 months before he could pass the sacred mountain. If his sea of knowledge was restored, Yi Guchen would definitely be able to improve his strength further in these 2 months. By then, he would shut up all those who doubted him. However, before he started cultivating, Yi Guchen still had one more thing to do. That was to find the Xuanlian. As a disciple of the Holy Emblem, Xuanlian's cave abode was also a top-grade cave abode full of spirit qi. Yi Guchen arrived at the entrance of the cave abode not long after. Are you Brother Dugu? Please come in. Xuanlian's voice came from inside the cave abode. Yi Guchen entered and found that the entire cave abode was very simple. There were no decorations. Xuanlian sat cross-legged on a futon and looked at Yi Guqin with a faint smile. Brother Xuanlian. Yi Guqin cupped his hands slightly. Let me guess. You might want to ask about my and Kongkong's origins, Xuanlian said with a smile. Indeed. To tell you the truth, I am the 9th generation of the Sword Master Echelon, Yi Guqin said directly without any hesitation. The 9th generation of the Sword Master Echelon was not unique to Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin even concluded that there must be other Sword Master Echelons in the Sword Dynasty. Therefore, Yi Guqin was not worried that revealing his identity as a Sword Master Echelon would expose his original identity. Xuanlian nodded slightly. Looking at Xuanlian's calm appearance, Yi Guqin was slightly surprised. Brother Xuanlian, you don't seem surprised at all. Yi Guqin asked. I already know, Xuanlian said with a faint smile. You already know. Yi Guqin raised his eyebrows slightly. Xuanlian raised his hand slightly. On the back of his hand, a swastika symbol appeared. This is. Yi Guqin's eyes narrowed. Chapter 953. Just as the swastika emblem appeared on the back of Xuanlian's hand, a golden sword mark emblem appeared on the back of Yi Guqin's hand uncontrollably. Oh, the elite sequence. It seems that Brother Dugu is not an ordinary person even among the 9 generations of sword masters. Seeing Yi Guqin's golden emblem, Xuanlian was slightly surprised. Normally, the 9 generations of sword masters would have a cyan emblem. The golden emblem meant the elite sequence, and the elite sequence was more likely to compete for the position of the 9 generations of sword masters. Brother Xuanlian, this is. Yi Guqin looked at the emblem on the back of Xuanlian's hand and was puzzled. When he met Kongkong before, he also had the same situation. The sword masters would resonate with each other. However, the emblem on the back of Xuanlian's hand was not shaped like a sword mark. This was what puzzled Yi Guqin. Xuanlian smiled and said, Brother Dugu, how much do you know about the sword masters? To be honest, although I'm a sword master, I don't know much about the origin and situation of the sword masters. Yi Guqin shook his head slightly. This is normal. After all, the sword masters have a long history. Even those overlord-level forces with a history of 10,000 years are like children in front of the sword masters. Xuanlian shook his head and smiled. Oh, it seems that Brother Xuanlian knows some secrets. Yi Guqin asked. I don't know any secrets because, strictly speaking, the inheritance I'm in has a great relationship with the sword masters, Xuanlian said seriously. I'd like to hear more. Yi Guqin frowned. He felt that what Xuanlian was going to say would involve some big secret. I think junior brother should have told you that we are from the Shihuang domain, Xuanlian said. Yi Guqin nodded slightly. Then I can tell you that junior brother and I are both sequences of the Sword Buddha lineage in the Shihuang domain, Xuanlian said. West Brilliance domain, Sword Buddha lineage. Yi Guqin narrowed his eyes. Sword sect lineage, Sword Buddha lineage. As long as one wasn't an idiot, one would know that there was a connection between the two. Actually, the lineage of the Sword Buddha is similar to the lineage of the Sword sect. It has been passed down from generation to generation. Our generation is also competing for the position of the 9th Sword Buddha, Xuanlian said. Yi Guqin nodded lightly, and then he asked, the Sword sect exists in the South Horizon region, and the Sword Buddha exists in the West Brilliance region. Could it be? That's right, said Xuanlian. Each of the 9 realms has a legacy. These legacies are extremely ancient, and are related to great secrets. Actually, I don't know much about them. Yi Guqin suddenly realized that he was right. The Sword sect of the South Heaven region. The Sword Buddha lineage of the West Brilliance domain. What other lineages would there be in the other regions? Where did these 9 lineages originate from, and what was the relationship between the 9 lineages? Yi Guqin realized that the more he understood, the more confusing it became. Brother Xuanlian and Kongkong are both sequences of the Sword Buddha, but they don't seem to be competing? Yi Guqin asked. Logically speaking, when 2 sequences meet, even if they don't directly fight to the death, they should at least fight to the death. Although I'm the sequence of the 9th Sword Buddha, I have no intention of becoming the Sword Buddha. Junior brother Kong Kong is the most suitable candidate. Xuanlian said. Yi Guqin's eyes flashed. He had also noticed that Kong Kong's constitution was unusual, and there must be some secret. Then why did brother Xuanlian bring Kong Kong to the South Horizon region? Yi Guqin asked casually. This. Xuanlian seemed to hesitate. I'm sorry. I was rude, Yi Guqin said. It's fine. There are some secrets in it that I can't tell you for the time being, but if there's a suitable opportunity in the future, I'll definitely tell you. Xuanlian said. Yi Guqin smiled faintly and didn't mind. He and Xuanlian had only known each other for a few days, and it was already good enough that he could tell so many secrets. At least Yi Guqin now knew that in the other 8 regions, there were similar lineages to the sword sect, and there was also competition between sequences. By the way, compared to the illusory secrets of the 9 lineages, Brother Dugu should pay more attention to Mount Saint Crossing. Xuanlian had obviously heard of the bet between Yi Guqin and Hua Yuntao. Indeed, I still have to prepare, so I'll take my leave. Yi Guqin stood up and cupped his hands. I wish you success. Xuanlian put his palms together. Yi Guqin then left. The number of spots to enter the elite sequence is already very few. To be able to enter the elite sequence, one must be a dragon or phoenix amongst men. Perhaps this Saint Crossing Mountain is really not that difficult for Brother Dugu. Xian Lian mumbled. On the other side, Yi Guqin once again walked towards the Spirit Gathering Pavilion. Yi Guqin had 10 days to cultivate in the Spirit Gathering Pavilion every month. Yi Guqin also planned to use the virtual soul fruit in the Spirit Gathering Pavilion to completely recover his sea of consciousness. Yi Guqin had just arrived at the entrance of the valley where the Spirit Gathering Pavilion was located when he saw a beautiful figure in black standing in front of the valley. The woman was wearing a long black dress, and her black hair was tied into a bun. Her neck was slender and delicate. She looked at Yi Guqin with a complicated expression on her face. Although she was not extremely beautiful, she still had an exquisite face. It was Ling Moyin. Her impression of Yi Guqin was that he was arrogant and supercilious. Even her master, Luo Feng of the Sword Technique Palace, personally invited Yi Guqin to be his disciple, but he was rejected. At that time, Ling Moyin obviously thought that Yi Guqin was just an arrogant person. However, Yi Guqin's performance in the ancient Chaos Wasteland made Ling Moyin feel extremely complicated. Seeing Ling Moyin, Yi Guqin's expression didn't change. Dugu wu bai. Ling Moyin said. What's the matter? Yi Guqin said indifferently. He didn't dislike Ling Moyin, but he didn't have a good impression of her either. The reason he saved Ling Moyin before was purely because they were both Sacred Cliff College disciples. It was impossible for him to turn a blind eye to it. You're Ouyang Tianji, and you've already returned to the Ouyang family. Presumably, he will rely on the resources of the Ouyang family to break through to the divine dwelling stage. Ling Moyin bit her lip. Oh, so. Yi Guqin tilted his head slightly. At that time, he will definitely break through the sacred mountain and kill your spirit, Ling Moyin said. Thank you for telling me. Yi Guqin's expression was still indifferent. He wasn't even afraid of Ouyang Fengyun, so why would he be afraid of Ouyang Tianji? You. Seeing that Yi Guqin was still so indifferent, Ling Moyin felt a little annoyed. She had kindly come to remind Yi Guqin, but Yi Guqin didn't seem to care. If there's nothing else, I'll go in and train, Yi Guqin said indifferently. During this period, I will also work hard to break through to the divine dwelling stage, Ling Moyin suddenly said with a faint look in her eyes. Huh? Yi Guqin looked at Ling Moyin. Ling Moyin was ranked 15th on the sword ranking, and her cultivation had long reached the peak of 9th stage. She could already try to break through to the divine dwelling stage. Why? Yi Guqin asked. No matter what, I can't ruin the reputation of Sacred Cliff College. After I break through to the divine dwelling stage, I will definitely do my best to break through the sacred mountain, Ling Moyin vowed. Evidently, Ling Moyin had a strong sense of belonging to Sacred Cliff College. She couldn't bear to ruin the reputation of Sacred Cliff College because of her relationship with Yiguchen. Ah, even if I saved you, you still don't believe me. Yiguchen smiled faintly and didn't say anything. He brushed past Ling Moyin and entered the valley. Ling Moyin's delicate body trembled. She suddenly felt that she had done something wrong. But in an instant, she suppressed this complicated emotion, and her beautiful eyes surged with determination. Dugu Wubai, it's not that I don't believe you, but Sacred Cliff College can't afford to lose face. Chapter 954. In a room on the third floor of the Spirit Gathering Pavilion, Yiguchen sat cross-legged, preparing to recover his sea of consciousness. Yiguchen's cultivation speed was not slow, but because his sea of consciousness had not recovered, his cultivation speed in the Heaven and Earth Spirit Bridge realm had slowed down. The Heaven and Earth Spirit Bridge was a bridge between the Sea of Consciousness and the Sea of Qi. Yiguchen's Sea of Consciousness had not recovered, so it naturally affected his cultivation speed. He took out the ethereal soul fruit and began to refine it. An extremely pure soul energy flowed into his dried-up Sea of Consciousness. Yiguchen's Sea of Consciousness had been dried up because he had used the Eye of the Void, but now it was starting to fill up. The medicinal power of the middle-grade sacred soul medicine was extremely strong. Yiguchen immediately felt pure soul energy surging into his Sea of Consciousness. His divine soul was also gradually recovering. Not only that, but the guardian spiritual item in his Sea of Consciousness, the meteorite demonic soul butterfly, also began to recover. Again. Yiguchen took out some transparent crystals again. They were the soul crystals of the false saint expert's remains that he had obtained in the Great Tomb. The soul crystals of the false saint expert contained soul energy. Although they were not as strong as those of a true saint expert, they were definitely not weaker than sacred soul medicine. Yiguchen activated the devouring power and began to refine the soul crystals. Another majestic soul energy flowed into Yiguchen's Sea of Consciousness. Yiguchen's dried-up Sea of Consciousness was like an awakened dragon, stirring up the wind and clouds. There was no one else in the Spirit Gathering Pavilion other than Yiguchen. Because of the previous lesson, when the disciples knew that Yiguchen had come to cultivate, they hurriedly withdreau, afraid that they would become the next Ouyang Tianji. Ah, what a strong soul suppression! It's coming from the Spirit Gathering Pavilion. The disciples who had withdrawn from the Spirit Gathering Pavilion looked at the third floor of the Spirit Gathering Pavilion in surprise. Could it be Senior Brother Dugu? How is this possible? Is Senior Brother Dugu's soul energy so strong? Some disciples whispered to each other. Even the elder who was guarding the Spirit Gathering Pavilion frowned as he felt a powerful spiritual power. Looks like this kid wasn't impulsive when he said he wanted to break into the Saint Crossing Mountain. The pavilion protecting elder muttered to himself. Inside the third floor of the Spirit Gathering Pavilion, Yiguchen was surrounded by transparent soul ripples. Su Qingyu's figure appeared in midair. Not only is your Sea of Qi different from ordinary people, but your Sea of Consciousness is also so special. Yiguchen, you really surprise me time and time again, Su Qingyu muttered to himself. He also did not know that Yiguchen cultivated the 9 Tribulations Heart Sutra. Perfect fleshly body, limitless Sea of Qi, and primal chaos Sea of Consciousness. But Yiguchen had both. With such talents, Su Qingyu finally believed that Yiguchen would be able to fulfill his promise and enter the Heavenly God Sword sect to save Su Jianshi. Rumble. In Yiguchen's Sea of Consciousness, it was as if lightning flashed and thunder roared. A few days passed. At a certain moment, Yiguchen opened his eyes abruptly. A powerful soul suppression suddenly spread out from his body. Both of his eyes had faintly turned transparent, as if they were filled with soul power. Yiguchen suddenly circulated his primal chaos Sea of Consciousness. A terrifying divine sense spread out for tens of thousands of feet. Unlike before, Yiguchen could feel that the worms were digging at the ground. He could feel the ripples of the butterfly's wings. He could feel the exclamations of every disciple outside the spirit-gathering pavilion. Yiguchin's divine sense not only expanded in range, but it also increased in sensitivity. Moreover, the meteorite demonic butterfly in Yiguchin's sea of consciousness had not only awakened, but it had also absorbed enough soul power. A fourth star spot appeared on its wings. This meant that the meteorite demonic butterfly had officially transformed into a 4-star star. At the moment of metamorphosis, Yiguchin's soul power surged above his head and condensed into a beautiful soul butterfly that was overflowing with starlight. Yiguchin could feel the terrifying soul power contained in this demonic butterfly. Is this the ability of the 4-star meteorite demonic butterfly, the demonic butterfly transformation? Yiguchin was shocked. The soul attack power of the demonic butterfly transformation was obviously more powerful than the star's soul wave, soul-shattering star needle, star's soul light beam, and so on. Finally, I've completely recovered. Yiguchin's eyes were clear, and a powerful aura spread out. It had been a long time since Yiguchin had left the Tianhuang Plains. Yiguchin had finally recovered his full strength. Before this, although Yiguchin's strength was not weak, it was still lacking. And now, this weakness had been completely fixed. After your sea of consciousness has recovered, your cultivation speed should be faster. Su Qingyu smiled faintly. Yiguchin nodded slightly. Since my sea of consciousness has completely recovered, outside of the spirit-gathering pavilion, the terrifying spiritual pressure caused the hearts of all the Divine Cliff Academy disciples to palpitate. Mount Saint Crossing, interesting. The guardian elder smiled faintly. In the following time, Yiguchin was completely immersed in cultivation. As time went by, Yiguchin's 3-month promise was getting closer and closer. The entire Sword Dynasty was faintly gathering. Many warriors had begun to rush to the location of Mount Saint Crossing, the sacred sky ridge. This time, one side of the bet was Sword Demon Duge Wubai, the first in the 5 Academy selection, the new 10th on the sword ranking, and a rising star in the Sword Dynasty. The other side was the first elder of Tensei College, the false saint expert of the Hua family, Hua Yuntao. The bet between these two naturally attracted the attention of countless people. Although most people did not think that Yiguchin could win the bet, they also wanted to see with their own eyes how far Yiguchin could go. The Tiandu Ridge was one of the most prosperous areas among the 360 ridges of the Sword Dynasty. It was also where the Hua family, one of the 5 false saint families of the Sword Dao Alliance, was located. The entire Tiandu Ridge was under the control of the Hua family. In the Tiandu Ridge, there was a pavilion on a mountain peak that was full of spiritual qi. In the pavilion, 2 figures were sitting opposite each other, playing chess. On one side was an old man in a purple and gold robe. Yiguchin would not be unfamiliar with him. It was Hua Yuntao. On the other side, there was an extremely handsome young master. His eyes were as deep as a lake, and his aura was as deep as an abyss, giving people a feeling of profoundness. I've lost again. Wuxiu, your chess skills are really not as good as the Sword Dao, Hua Yuntao said with a faint smile. Oh, elder, you flatter me. The handsome young man was none other than the most dazzling genius of the Hua family, Hua Wuxiu, who was ranked 3rd on the Sword Dao list. You're flattering me. You've integrated the Sword Dao into your chess Dao, and also used your chess Dao to nourish your Sword Dao. Such talent is rare even in the Sword Dynasty. Hua Yuntao was not stingy with his praise. No matter how talented I am, I was still suppressed by the 3 lights of the world, Hua Wuxiu said with a faint smile. The 3-month agreement is approaching. I'd like to see what kind of tricks Duge Wubai can play. When he loses the bet, I can plant the soul mourning bug on him and make him a dog of the Hua family. At the thought of Yiguchin, Hua Yuntao's face darkened. Yiguchin had publicly contradicted him and caused Hua Yuntao to lose face. He naturally would not have any good intentions towards Yiguchin. Sword Demon. Duge Wubai. Hua Wuxiu muttered to himself and placed a chess piece on the board. In an instant, the entire chessboard became a slaughterhouse. Chapter 955. Hengnan mountain range, where the Shangguan family was located. Two figures stood side by side on the roof of a building. One of the figures was a yellow-clothed girl with a scorpion tail braid. She looked rather mischievous. She was Shangguan Yan. The person beside her was a well-proportioned and fit man. He had sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes. His gaze was extraordinarily fierce. He had red hair and wore red armor. On his back was a blood-red giant sword that was as tall as a man. The side of the blade was jagged and looked like a shark's tooth. In the Sword Dynasty, there were almost no people who did not recognize this quasi-tribulation divine weapon, the Balrog Sharktooth sword. The owner of the Balrog Sharktooth sword was the top genius of the Shangguan family, the seventh on the sword ranking, Shangguan Jingshen. He, cousin, this time it's lively, we have to get together. Shangguan Yan giggled. I didn't expect that after fighting with Jiang Feng Nian for so long, a master would appear out of nowhere. I also want to see what kind of existence Xingzhu's master is. Shangguan Jingshen coldly snorted, feeling somewhat displeased. Both he and Jiang Fengmian liked Mu Xingzhu. He also thought that Mu Xingzhu would only choose between him and Jiang Fengmian. Who would have thought that Mu Xingzhu's master would appear out of nowhere? Moreover, this master was so young. More importantly, although Mu Xingzhu claimed that she and Yi Guqin were master and disciple. But in the eyes of outsiders, Mu Xingzhu's close attachment to Yi Guqin had exceeded the boundary of master and disciple. No one would object if they said that they were cultivation companions. This made Shangguan Jingshen, who had a domineering personality, somewhat unable to accept. Mount Saint Crossing, I want to compete with that Duga Wu Bai. Shangguan Jingshen said coldly. His divine dwelling aura erupted like an erupting volcano. TSK, cousin is very angry. The consequences are very serious. Duga Wu Bai, you're going to be in trouble. Shangguan Yan gloated. After all, she had some friction with Yi Guqin in the past. Although it wasn't a grudge, she still wanted to get back at him. Fengxia Ridge, the location of Tianxian College. Outside a seclusion area, there was a beautiful young girl in a red dress with skin as white as jade. She was looking at the seclusion area anxiously. It was Yinglang. It's been so long. Could Xingzhu have failed her breakthrough? Yinglang was very worried. Mu Xingzhu received the elemental spirit bottleneck breaking elixir from Yi Guqin. After returning to Tianxian College, she went into seclusion to make a breakthrough. He still hadn't appeared. At this moment, a faint voice suddenly sounded. Junior sister Mu hasn't come out yet? Yinglang's expression turned serious when she heard this voice. A woman in a palace dress walked over from not far away. Her skin was fair, and her face was as smooth as jade. She had a very good figure and curves. Her long light blonde hair was tied up in a bun, and she looked noble. This woman's temperament was like a noble phoenix, making people involuntarily feel ashamed of their inferiority. She indeed had the confidence and ability to do so. Greetings, senior sister Gong. Yinglang said, but there was a trace of worry in her eyes. The woman in front of her was called Suki Miyazaki. She was the highest-ranking disciple of the Holy Emblem in Tianxian College. She was also Wu Hongyan's direct disciple and ranked 8th on the sword leaderboard. As a woman, Suki Miyazaki was able to rank in the top 10 of the sword leaderboard. It was clear that her talent and strength were extraordinary. However, Suki Miyazaki had a conflict with Mu Xingzhu. Actually, the reason for this conflict was very simple. Suki Miyazaki was Wu Hongyan's only disciple, and she was highly valued by Wu Hongyan. However, after Mu Xingzhu's arrival, Wu Hongyan shifted all her attention to Mu Xingzhu, and Mu Xingzhu was unwilling to become Wu Hongyan's disciple. Under these circumstances, how could Suki Miyazaki and Mu Xingzhu have a good relationship? Just like how palace leader Luo Feng wanted to take Yi Guqin as his disciple, but Yi Guqin refused, which made Ling Moyin angry. Suki Miyazaki thought that Mu Xingzhu was taking advantage of her. Of course, Suki Miyazaki wasn't a despicable person. She wouldn't use any despicable means against Mu Xingzu, but she obviously wouldn't be nice to Mu Xingzu either. Junior sister Mu hasn't come out from her closed-door training for so long. Could she have failed? I heard that her cheap master gave her a Yuan spirit breakthrough pill, Suki Miyazaki said indifferently. The words cheap master were rather harsh to the ears. As the saying goes, love the house and its crow. She disliked Mu Xingzu, and naturally didn't have a good impression of Yiguchen. That's hard to say, although Yinglang didn't dare to oppose Suki Miyazaki too much, she still had some resentment in her heart. Oh, is that so? The corners of Suki Miyazaki's lips curved slightly. She obviously didn't believe it. It wasn't that easy to break through to the divine dwelling stage. It was at this moment that a storm of chi suddenly rose in the closed-door training area, accompanied by a powerful pressure that spread out like a tornado. This is the pressure of the divine dwelling stage. Yinglang's face lit up with joy. Suki Miyazaki's beautiful face froze a little. It's not up to you to decide how my master is like, Mu Xingzu. A clear voice rang out, and a beautiful girl in a green dress broke out of her closed-door training. It was Mu Xingzu. Mu Xingzu's skin and bones were like jade, glistening and shining. At a glance, she was like a jade sculpture, exuding a pure aura. Mu Xingzu had broken through to the divine dwelling stage. Xingzhu, you've broken through. Yinglang was happy from the bottom of her heart. Suki Miyazaki's face froze. Senior sister Gong, it doesn't matter what you say about me, but if you're disrespectful to my master, don't blame me for being impolite. Mu Xingzu reprimanded. In the past, Mu Xingzu didn't care much about Suki Miyazaki's cold face. But if Suki Miyazaki was disrespectful to Yiguchen, Mu Xingzu obviously wouldn't let her off. Oh, you mean your master can win the bet and pass the 10th level of Mount St. Crossing? Suki Miyazaki couldn't help but sneer. My master always keeps his word, Mu Xingzu said in a resolute tone. In her mind, Yiguchen was an omnipotent existence. Oh, how naive. Who does that Dugawubai think he is? Jian Jinghong. Suki Miyazaki shook her head. Jian Jinghong, who was ranked second on the sword list, had once passed through Mount St. Crossing at the 5th level of the Spirit Bridge of Heaven and Earth. Although he only reached the 9th level, it was still quite amazing. And after breaking through to the divine dwelling stage, Jian Jinghong broke through to the 18th level of Mount St. Crossing in one go, shocking the entire sword dynasty. Even a proud woman like Suki Miyazaki had no choice but to submit to Jian Jinghong. She had also competed with Jian Jinghong before, but the result was a complete defeat. Therefore, in Suki Miyazaki's mind, Jian Jinghong was the absolute benchmark. As for Yiguchen, he was nothing. In Suki Miyazaki's eyes, he was just a person who became famous because of a bet with Hua Yuntao. Such a person only made Suki Miyazaki feel ridiculous. My master is not weaker than anyone. Mu Xingzu wanted to roar. Her master was someone who had fought with existences like Gu Xiaoyang and Di Haotian. No matter how strong Jian Jinghong was, how could he compare to Di Haotian? But Mu Xingzu held back. She knew that she couldn't expose Yiguchen's original identity. I'll wait and see what happens on Mount St. Crossing. Suki Miyazaki sneered, turned around, and left. Watching Suki Miyazaki's departing figure, Mu Xingzu clenched her teeth. Master, Xingzhu believes in you. Even in the Sword Dynasty, no one can overshadow your glory. Chapter 956. Just as the entire Sword Dynasty was in turmoil because of the bet between Yiguchen and Hua Yuntao. Yiguchen, who was at the center of the incident, was peacefully cultivating and improving himself in Sacred Cliff College. In the 2 months, Yiguchen had a total of 20 days of cultivation in the Spirit Gathering Pavilion and 20 days in the Sword Soul Cave. After his sea of consciousness was completely restored, Yiguchen also recovered his cultivation speed, which was faster than before. Soon, 3 months passed by in the blink of an eye. On this day, Yiguchen walked out of the Sword Soul Cave. Although he had been cultivating all this time, his essence, energy, and spirit were very good, and incomparably flourishing. In the past 2 months, my cultivation has improved again. Yi Guqian's eyes were bright. In the past 2 months, Yi Guqian had made a breakthrough and reached the 6th stage of the Heaven and Earth Spirit Bridge. Logically speaking, Yi Guqian had just broken through the 5th stage, so it was impossible for him to break through the 6th stage so quickly. It was all because of the recovery of his sea of consciousness that Yi Guqian's realm improved again. In addition, Yi Guqian also made progress in sword principle. He had comprehended the godly sword lightning controlling technique to the profound realm and could perform a big killing move. He had completely comprehended and consolidated the thunder sword essence. In addition, he had also comprehended the sky-devouring secret skill, one of the top 10 Archean secret skills. Yi Guqian had also completely comprehended the first level and comprehended the devouring secret skill. Putting all these aside, the most important thing for Yi Guqian was to cultivate that move. That move was a move that Yi Guqian could only cultivate when his sea of consciousness was completely restored. During this period of comprehension and cultivation in the Sword Soul Cave, Yi Guqian had also grasped the initial stage of that move. It's about time. Yi Guqian walked out of the Sword Soul Cave, his aura was heavy. Even though it had only been 3 months since then. However, compared to 3 months ago, Yi Guqian's strength had changed tremendously. He believed that this change would definitely shock everyone. Not long after Yi Guqian walked out of the Sword Soul Cave, he saw Bei Xian Elder rushing over. When he saw Yi Guqian, he hurriedly said, "Little friend Dugu, the time limit of your bet with Hua Yuntao is about to end. How is your cultivation now? Are you confident that you can pass the 10th level of Mount Saint Crossing?" "I should be," Yi said. He hadn't passed through Mount Saint Crossing, so he didn't dare to make any guarantees. However, he was very confident in himself. "I should," Bei Xian Elder's heart. Although he was mentally prepared, he was still somewhat unable to accept it. After all, he had found the heavens, the 5 Academies' 5 Academies selection. 3 months of Heavens Academies Hanses S Heavens's. This was undoubtedly a huge blow to Sacred Cliff College. Seeing Bei Xian Elder's expression, Yi Guqian didn't say anything. Until now, he could only prove to everyone that he had passed the Saint Crossing. A few days passed in the blink of an eye. The day of the bet had officially arrived. On this day, the entire Sacred Cliff College was mobilized. Many ships stopped outside Sacred Cliff College. Obviously, many disciples of Sacred Cliff College were going to watch. This bet was not only about Yi Guqian and Hua Yuntao. It was also about the reputation of the Divine Cliff College and the Heavenly Saint College. If Yi Guqian lost, Sacred Cliff College would naturally lose face. When Yi Guqian arrived outside Sacred Cliff College, there were already many people waiting for him. Xuanlian, Kong Kong, Han Lingxian, Yen Suk, and the others were all there. In addition, Jiang Yan was also there. However, the way he looked at Yi Guqian was as if he was watching a show and taking pleasure in his misfortune. After Ouyang Tianji returned to the Ouyang family, he didn't appear again. "Young Master Dugu, Lingxian believes that you will succeed." Han Lingxian walked gracefully and smiled at Yi Guqian. Although there was a big gap between her and Yi Guqian's status, she felt relieved. She knew that she wasn't good enough for Yi Guqian. Even if she just stood behind him and encouraged him, it would be enough. "Thank you." Yi Guqian nodded slightly. With Big Brother Dugu involved, there won't be a problem. Kong Kong giggled. He was living a comfortable life in Sacred Cliff College. He didn't cultivate diligently and spent all his time flirting with little senior sister. "But you still have to be careful. Mount Saint Crossing isn't that simple," Xuanlian said. He was also a disciple of the Holy Emblem and had passed the 10th level of Mount Saint Crossing. "Oh, I wonder how many levels of Mount Saint Crossing have you passed, Brother Xuanlian?" Yi Guqian asked. The 10th level was certain. However, the higher the level, the more difficult it was to pass. "Oh, my ability is limited. I only passed the 17th level." Xuanlian put his palms together and shook his head with a smile. The 17th level. Yi Guqin was slightly surprised. This was a very good result. It meant that Xuanlian was very likely to become a false saint in the future. The 17th level is nothing. Jian Jinghong has reached the 18th level. As for Purple, the first on the sword ranking, he has passed the 19th level, Xuanlian said. Oh, the first on the sword ranking hasn't reached the 20th level? Yi Guqin was a little surprised. It seemed that the 20th level of Mount Saint Crossing was really a forbidden area. But it was precisely because of this that it could stimulate Yi Guqin's fighting spirit and enthusiasm. At this moment, a beautiful ink-colored figure appeared, exuding a powerful aura. It was Ling Moyin. Senior Sister Ling, she has broken through to the Divine Dwelling stage. Why is she in such a hurry to break through to the Divine Dwelling stage? She is probably afraid that senior brother Dugu will fail and bring shame to Sacred Cliff College, so she wants to break through and pass the 10th level of Mount Saint Crossing to restore the reputation of the college. Ling Moyin's attitude was very obvious. Her feelings towards Yi Guqin were very complicated, but this couldn't change her opinion. The probability of Yi Guqin passing through Mount Saint Crossing was really not high. Ling Moyin wanted to restore Sacred Cliff College's reputation in her own way. Looking at Ling Moyin rushing over, Yi Guqin frowned slightly. You don't have to do this. Yi Guqin could see that Ling Moyin's breakthrough was a little forced. This would affect her future progress on the martial path. Dugu Wubai, you don't have to say anything. I have made up my mind. This time, I will also pass through Mount Saint Crossing. Ling Moyin's tone was resolute and decisive. Yi Guqin shook his head when he saw Ling Moyin's attitude. Sigh, this girl is so stubborn. Bei Xian Elder also felt a little helpless. Subsequently, in addition to the elders, the 5 hall masters also made a rare appearance, preparing to set off together. I want to see how this Dugu Wubai will perform. Danxia Hall Master chuckled. This boy's talent and strength are not bad, but his character is too arrogant. I think this time. Luo Feng's expression was indifferent as he shook his head slightly. Yi Guqin refused to be his disciple. Although Luo Feng wouldn't do anything, he obviously didn't think highly of Yi Guqin and was somewhat disappointed. Oh, is that so? My disciple Kong Kong admires Dugu Wubai quite a bit. Danxia Hall Master laughed. Ah, then let's see the result. Luo Feng said indifferently. And just as the people of Sacred Cliff College stepped onto the ship and prepared to set off for Mount Saint Crossing, a black-clothed figure walked unsteadily, holding a jug of wine in his left hand. He appeared slightly drunk in front of everyone. With the appearance of this person, the entire noisy Divine Cliff Cave instantly became so quiet that even a pin drop could be heard. Chapter 957. It was a young man in black. His face was as sharp as a knife, and his facial features were sharp and angular. He should have been an extremely handsome and carefree man. However, at this moment, this young man had stubble on his beard and was drunk. He looked decadent and dejected. His right arm was missing, and his left hand was holding a wine pot, taking a sip from it from time to time. His dejected gaze swept across the crowd and stopped for a while on Ling Moyin and Yi Guqin. Then, he silently boarded a ship. Senior Brother Ling, greetings, Senior Brother Ling. Seeing the young man in black come over, the surrounding Sacred Cliff College disciples all had complicated expressions on their faces as they slightly saluted the young man. He's Ling Emoshu. Yi Guqin's eyes were deep. Big brother, you're finally willing to come out. Ling Moyin's delicate body trembled slightly. In a flash, she rushed in front of Ling Emoshu. Her eyes were red as she held back her tears. Ever since her right arm was cut off by Hua Wuxiu in the 5 Academies tournament and her spiritual palace was destroyed, she had been in seclusion. Her brother, Ling Emoshu, had been locking himself in the courtyard and drowning his sorrows in alcohol all day long. However, his sorrows only made him more sorrowful and dispirited. No one could persuade Ling Emoshu. No one expected that Ling Emoshu would actually appear on this trip to Mount Saint Crossing. Looking at Ling Moyin's blushing face, Ling Emoshu's eyes flashed with a trace of pain. Ling Emoshu knew how hard Ling Moyin was trying to avenge him. However, the more Ling Moyin was like this, the more pain Ling Emoshu felt. He hated it. He hated that he was so powerless that he could only numb himself with alcohol and use it to escape reality. Emoshu, you. Bei Xian Elder also let out a long sigh. For Hua Wuxiu, it might just be defeating an opponent. However, for Ling Emoshu, it was ruining his life. This also caused Sacred Cliff College to lose an outstanding disciple of the Holy Emblem. Ling Emoshu couldn't face Ling Moyin, so he could only continue drinking. He turned to look at Yi Guqin and said in a raspy voice, "You can't win against the Hua family." Ling Emoshu, who had once lost to Hua Wuxiu, knew how powerful the Hua family was. "Oh, you think I'm the same as you?" Yi Guqin put his hands behind his back, his expression indifferent, and his tone indifferent. As soon as he said this, all the Sacred Cliff College students around him fell silent. Ling Emoshu tightened his grip on the wine pot. "Dugu Wubai, what are you talking about?" Ling Moyin's eyes were bloodshot as she looked at Yi Guqin. Was Yi Guqin looking down on Ling Emoshu? What's the difference?" Ling Emoshu smiled dejectedly and continued drinking. "Sorry, I don't talk to cowards." Yi Guqin stopped talking and turned his back to Ling Emoshu. Everyone around them was stunned. Even the 5 temple masters frowned slightly. Yi Guqin's attitude was too vile. Han Lingxian, Xuanlian, and the others were also slightly surprised. Yi Guqin shouldn't be such an arrogant and rude person. "Dugu Wubai, you bastard." Ling Moyin's eyes were bloodshot as she rebuked. She almost couldn't help but attack Yi Guqin. However, Ling Emoshu stopped her. "Little Yin, he's right. I'm indeed a coward." Ling Emoshu smiled bitterly and didn't say anything else. "Big brother." Ling Moyin bit her red lips and held back her tears. The complicated feelings in her heart towards Yi Guqin had turned into a faint trace of hatred. She hated Yi Guqin for mocking Ling Emoshu. "Senior brother Dugu, you've gone too far. Yes, even if senior brother Ling's cultivation is crippled, he's still fighting for Sacred Cliff College. That's why he's like this." "That's right. Maybe senior brother Dugu will end up worse than senior brother Ling on Mount St. Crossing." Yi Guqin originally had some prestige in Sacred Cliff College. However, Yi Guqin's action caused many of the surrounding Divine Cliff Academy's disciples to cast dissatisfied gazes at him. At this moment, Yi Guqin was secretly thinking. A heart that's completely numb can't be revived by normal means. I can only make him feel heart-wrenching pain to stimulate his desire to become stronger. Yi Guqin was not the kind of person who looked down on others. The reason he did this was to hurt Ling Emoshu's heart and stimulate his unyielding will. This was only the first step. However, it seemed that not many people could understand Yi Guqin's good intentions. Only Xuanlian thought for a moment and smiled faintly at Yi Guqin. He understood Yi Guqin's thoughts. "Let's set off." Bei Xian Elder waved his hand. Everyone from the Divine Cliff Academy headed towards Mount St. Crossing of the Divine Sky Ridge in this discordant atmosphere. Just as Sacred Cliff College was about to set off, countless warriors from the Sword Dynasty flocked to the Sacred Sky Ridge. This bet could be said to have attracted everyone's attention. Many people were also very curious. They weren't curious about who would win the bet, because the result was self-evident. They were curious about whether Yi Guqin dared to keep the bet. Sacred Sky Ridge, where Mount St. Crossing was located. As one of the 4 secret realms of the Sword Dynasty, Mount St. Crossing was obviously not ordinary. Looking at it, the entire Mount St. Crossing was divided into 20 levels. Each level of the mountain was suspended above the next level. To describe it more vividly, it was like a 1,000-layer pancake, one layer on top of another. And each level was an independent challenge space. Only after successfully challenging a level could one enter the next level. Mount St. Crossing was also a sacred place in the hearts of the Sword Dynasty's prodigies. Today, the periphery of Mount St. Crossing was already surrounded by 3 layers of people inside and outside. As far as the eye could see, it was densely packed and noisy like a swarm of ants. There were more than 400,000 Sword Dynasty warriors surrounding Mount St. Crossing. Many lords of the 360 ridges of the Sword Dynasty also came to watch the show. Among the lords, the Heavenly Wind Lord, Qin Zhen, was also among them. "Little friend Dugu, I hope you can succeed." Qin Zhen sighed inwardly. Although reason told him that Yi Guqian would not succeed, in the end, the Heavenly Wind Ridge was indebted to Yi Guqian. "Ha, Qin Zhen, I knew you would come. But do you really think that kid can succeed today?" 2 figures walked over from not far away. It was the Yellow Dragon Lord and the Purple Smoke Lord. Zi Yusin, Huang Feiyun, and many other prodigies of the 2 ridges were all killed by Yi Guqian. The Purple Smoke Lord and the Yellow Dragon Lord naturally hated Yi Guqian to the core. But Yi Guqian had become a disciple of Sacred Cliff College and had the Sword Master token, so there was nothing they could do. But today, seeing Yi Guqian fail, the 2 lords naturally came early. Are you sure?" Qin Zhen snorted. "Ha, is there any suspense in this ending? If Dugu Wubai succeeds, I'll twist my head off and let you kick it like a ball." The Purple Smoke Lord and the Yellow Dragon Lord looked at each other and smiled. Their disdain was obvious. Qin Zhen's expression was cold as he turned his head away. At this moment, a lot of noise sounded in the surroundings. The people from the college are finally here. Chapter 958. Everyone looked over and saw a floating ship appear in the distant sky. "That's the ship of Long River College." Some sharp-eyed people saw it. On one of the ships, Elder Yin Li of the Yin family stood indifferently, and beside him stood a person. It was Yin Wufeng, who had been defeated by Yi Guqian in the 5 Academies selection. "Wufeng, don't hold a grudge. Today, Dugu Wubai will be in a very difficult situation." Elder Yin Li smiled coldly. "I understand." Yin Wufeng clenched his fists, but he thought coldly, "Dugu Wubai, today I want to see if you can still be as proud as you were in the 5 Academies selection." On the other side, the ship of Sun Moon College appeared. Sun Moon College was now controlled by the Jiang and Shengguan families. On one of the ships, an outstanding young man in a blue robe stood indifferently. His blue hair fluttered in the wind, making him look gentle, elegant, and extremely handsome. He was playing with a maple leaf in his hand, a faint smile hanging from the corners of his mouth. It was the 5th on the sword list, Jiang Fengmian. On the other ship, there was a red-haired man in red armor and carrying a huge blood-red sword on his back. He was also standing there calmly and had a dignified appearance. The 7th on the sword list, Shengguan Jingshen. Beside him stood Shengguan Yan. "It's Jiang Fengmian and Shengguan Jingshen." Some people couldn't help exclaiming. TSK, I wonder how many of the top 10 on the sword list will come to Mount St. Crossing today." Many people shook their heads. In another part of the void, there was also a ship crossing over. "It's the Ouyang family." On the ship, there were several figures, 2 of which were familiar to Yi Guqian. They were Ouyang Fengyun and Ouyang Tianji. Ouyang Tianji's aura had also reached the divine dwelling stage. "Big brother, could it be that even you can't deal with that Dugu Wubai?" Ouyang Tianji was somewhat in disbelief. If he uses the 9-Dragon Thunder Prison, his strength is indeed not weak. But to say that he can pass the 10th level of Mount St. Crossing is a joke, Ouyang Fengyun said lightly. That's good. I've broken through to the divine dwelling stage. If I can break through to the 10th level today, I'll be able to completely trample Dugu Wubai under my feet." When he thought about losing the elemental spirit barrier breaking pill to Yi Guqian and the spirit gathering pavilion, Ouyang Tianji felt like vomiting blood. Today, he finally had the chance to completely suppress Yi Guqian, so he naturally wouldn't let go of this opportunity. 9th on the sword ranking, Ouyang Fengyun. This is the 3rd genius to enter the top 10 of the sword ranking. Some people sighed. At this moment, another flying boat came through the air. Some people exclaimed in surprise, "Hey, it's the Yu family's flying boat." Although the Yu family wasn't as strong as the 5 great pseudo-saint clans in the Sword Dao Alliance, their foundation wasn't weak either. At this moment, there was a cold beauty standing on the flying boat. It was Yu Shuangyan. But her face was pale and her aura was weak. It was obvious that her injuries hadn't recovered yet. At this moment, her beautiful eyes were filled with extreme resentment as she said coldly, "Dugu Wubai, can you still survive today?" As time passed, more and more people gathered around Mount Saint Crossing. Suddenly, a ship appeared in the void, exuding a majestic aura. "It's the people from Tensei College." Everyone's eyes narrowed. The party of today's bet had finally arrived. In front of a ship, several figures stood. The leader was an old man dressed in a purple gold robe. He was naturally the pseudo-saint expert, Hua Yuntao. There were several people standing next to him in order. Elder Hua Mo, Hua Xingjie, and Hua Tengfei of Tensei College were all there. But what shocked everyone the most was the young master who stood side by side with Hua Yuntao. That's Hua Wuxiu. Looking at the young man, more than 400,000 martial artists around Mount Saint Crossing were in an uproar. Hua Wuxiu, 3rd on the Sword Dao list, a disciple of the Holy Emblem, and a 7th grade heavenly talent. He had the divine light and darkness constitution and comprehended the dual sword Dao. He had all kinds of legends. Everyone didn't expect Hua Wuxiu to show up. TSK, interesting. Hua Wuxiu also showed up. It seems that Dugu Wubai is really in danger today. Some people shook their heads and sighed. "Oh, that kid hasn't come yet." Hua Yuntao narrowed his eyes slightly. "I'm afraid he doesn't dare to come." Hua Xingjie's tone was full of resentment. His hatred for Yiguchen was also difficult to wash away. "If that's the case, it's disappointing," Hua Wuxiu said lightly, not caring much. "Ha, it's so lively." Suddenly, there was a soft laughter that made people's hearts go numb. Another ship broke through the sky in the distance. It was the group of Tianxian College. The mature and charming figure in the lead instantly attracted the attention of most of the male martial artists. It was the dean of Tianxian College, Wu Hongyan. Beside her stood Mu Xingzu, Ying Lang, and Suki Miyazaki. Qin Paisai, Zhua Qiuqing, and the others who had joined Tianxian College also came today. "That Dugu Wubai doesn't seem to be here yet. Could it be that he's afraid?" Suki Miyazaki glanced at them and said lightly. "Master won't go back on his word. He'll definitely come." Mu Xingzu retorted. "Even if he comes, what can he do? He'll only be more embarrassed." Suki Miyazaki said indifferently. "You." Mu Xingzu ground her teeth. "That's enough, Xingzhu." Ying Lang tried to mediate. Wu Hongyan crossed her arms and her eyes flashed. Her mood was a little complicated. On the one hand, if Yiguchen couldn't pass the 10th level of Mount Saint Crossing, she could take Mu Xingzu as her disciple. On the other hand, Yiguchen's personality was quite to her taste. Wu Hongyan didn't want Yiguchen to fail and be dispirited. Humph. Hua Yuntao didn't look happy when he saw Wu Hongyan's arrival. If Wu Hongyan hadn't intervened, Yiguchen might have been forced to enroll in Tensei College. "Ha, there are quite a lot of people here." At that moment, 4 figures appeared in the void. There were 3 men and 1 woman, and all of them wore masks on their faces. One of them was no stranger to Yiguchen. It was Kenpo. "It's the Sword Sons." Mount Saint Crossing was in an uproar when they saw Kenpo and the others. Not only did many prodigies in the top 10 of the sword leaderboard appear today. There were even 4 Sword Sons. Jian Wu, 7th swordsman, Kenpo, Jian Shi, everyone was shocked when they saw the 4 figures. They didn't expect Yiguchen's bet to attract 4 Sword Sons. And these 4 Sword Sons were all from the Lone Cultivator camp. Kenpo, Dugu Wubai, the unparalleled swordsman that you mentioned, hasn't arrived yet. The only female sword son among the four spoke. She was wearing a tight-fitting outfit that outlined her slim figure. She wore a sword sun mask on her face. Although her face wasn't revealed, one could tell that she was a beautiful woman just by looking at her figure. She was none other than Jian Shi. Don't worry. With Brother Dugu's personality, he will definitely come, Kenpo said confidently. Kenpo, I don't believe you when you say that Dugu Wubai is qualified to compete for the position of Jiankoe. A deep voice sounded. It was 7th swordsman. Ha, isn't Mount Saint crossing the best opportunity to prove his ability today? Kenpo laughed. He didn't bring the 3 sword sons from the lone cultivator camp here for no reason. Instead, he wanted to prove Yiguchen's ability to them. That better be the case. Otherwise, other than little 13 who is qualified to compete for the position of Jiankoe, I'm afraid none of us have much of a chance, Jian Wu said. The little 13 he mentioned was the last of the 13 sword sons, Jian Shisan. Although he was the last of the 13, he was the strongest of the sword sons from the lone cultivator camp. Chapter 959. The reason why Kenpo brought the other 3 sword sons here was because he wanted them to know the reason. Yiguchen had the strength to compete for the position of Jiankoe. If Yiguchen did not perform well today, it would affect the other sword sons' impression and attitude towards Yiguchen. Brother Yi, it's all up to you today. Kenpo murmured in his heart. Time trickled by, and many warriors gradually began to feel impatient in their hearts. What's going on? Why hasn't Sacred Cliff College arrived yet? Could it be that Dugu Wubai is afraid? I think it's possible. After all, there's no suspense in this bet. Around Mount Saint Crossing, more than 400,000 warriors began to clamor. If Yiguchen did not appear today, they would have made a wasted trip. Elder Hua, it seems that Dugu Wubai is afraid. On the ship of Tensei College, Hua Mo sneered at Hua Yuntao. If he doesn't come, we'll go to Sacred Cliff College and ask for him. Hua Yuntao's face was cold. As a false sage expert, if a junior were to violate his agreement, where would he put his face? Just as everyone was getting impatient from waiting, several ships finally appeared in the distant sky. On the deck of the leading ship, a young man in a black robe stood with his hands behind his back. The wind blew past, causing his long hair to flutter. His dark eyes were as calm as an ancient well. Even in the face of such a big scene, there was not a trace of timidity or fear. He stood straight like a sword that pierced through the heavens. Today, he would completely reveal his bone-piercing sharpness. Yiguchen had arrived. He's here. Sacred Cliff College is here. Tisk tsk, that sword demon Dugu Wubai looks quite imposing. I wonder if he's just a silver spearhead. Seeing the arrival of Sacred Cliff College, the hundreds of thousands of people present heaved a sigh of relief. Today, they did not come in vain. Yiguchen looked over and his gaze met with Hua Yuntao's. I'm Dugu Wubai. I'm here to fulfill the promise of Mount Saint Crossing. Yiguchen's clothes fluttered. He looked disdainfully at Hua Yuntao, there was not the slightest bit of timidity in his eyes. What courage! Hua Yuntao snorted coldly. Although they were on opposite sides, he had to admit that. Yiguchen was indeed not an ordinary heaven's pride to be able to maintain his composure in front of a false saint. Even so, Hua Yuntao did not think that Yiguchen had the power to turn the situation around. Stage Saint crossing the spiritual bridge of heaven and earth's 6th stage of heaven's spiritual bridge. Many people could sense that Yiguchen's strength had strength to 6th stage. 3 months ago, Yiguchen's cultivation level was only 4th stage. Breaking through 2 minor realms in 3 months was already an extremely fast speed. No one doubted that if Yiguchen was given a year's time to break through the 10th level of Mount Saint Crossing. But unfortunately, little friend Dugu is still too impulsive. Qin Jin sighed deeply. He also felt pity for Yiguchen. Master. On the Tianxian College's side, Mu Xingzu flashed over and stood beside Yiguchen. You've broken through to the divine dwelling stage. Not bad. Yiguchen sensed Mu Xingzu's cultivation aura and smiled faintly. Master, Mount Saint Crossing. Mu Xingzu wanted to say something but stopped. It was impossible to say that he was not worried. After all, if Yiguchen failed, according to the agreement, he would have to break off his master-disciple relationship with Mu Xingzu. Dugu Wubai, are you ready? On the Tianxian College's side, Wu Hongyan's beautiful eyes looked over. Although Yiguchen's cultivation had improved a little, in their view, it was still useless. Although Wu Hongyan wanted to accept Mu Xingzu as her disciple, she did not want Mu Xingzu to have a gap in her heart because of this. It should be fine. Yiguchen smiled faintly. He did not want to say anything more. Everything depended on the facts. Oh, you're really full of confidence. Hua Xingjie, Hua Tengfei, and the others also sneered. You haven't broken through Mount Saint Crossing, yet you speak like that. It only shows your ignorance. An indifferent voice rang out, causing the clamor in the surroundings to cease. Yiguchen focused his gaze. Beside Hua Yuntao stood an elegant young master with a slender figure who looked like a dragon among men. Without any suspense, Yiguchen immediately knew the person's identity. Who else could it be but Hua Wuxiu? Although Hua Wuxiu's aura was not obvious at the moment, Yiguchen could faintly feel a trace of threat. Hua Wuxiu was not much weaker than Gu Xiaoyang in the past. Whether or not you're ignorant, it's not too late to decide after the results are out. Yiguchen smiled faintly. There was no anger, but tit for tat. Oh, fine. I hope you don't overestimate yourself like Ling Emoshu. Hua Wuxiu shook his head slightly and smiled faintly. As soon as these words came out, the disciples of Sacred Cliff College could not help but clench their fists. Ling Emoshu, who was drinking alone in a corner, heard these words. Blue veins appeared on his hand that was holding the wine pot. He closed his eyes slightly, and an extremely painful expression flashed between his brows. Hua Wuxiu, one day, I will defeat you with my own hands. Seeing Ling Emoshu's painful expression, Ling Moyin felt like a knife was being twisted in her heart. She coldly rebuked with bone-deep hatred. You're trying to hit a stone with an egg. You overestimate yourself. Hua Wuxiu shook his head faintly, ignoring Ling Moyin's roar. If it were Yiguchen, perhaps after a year of cultivation, Hua Wuxiu would feel a trace of threat. But Ling Moyin was nothing. Ling Moyin bit her lips until blood came out. Her beautiful eyes were bloodshot. Her only thought now was to pass the 10th level of Mount Saint Crossing and become a disciple of the Holy Emblem. Otherwise, she would not even be qualified to challenge Hua Wuxiu. Yiguchen did not comfort her. If there was a chance, he did not mind helping Ling Moyin deal with Hua Wuxiu. Okay, Dugu Wubai, you can start to pass Mount Saint Crossing. Hua Yuntao waved his hand. Over 400,000 martial artists in the surroundings were shocked. The bet was finally about to begin. Yiguchen nodded slightly and was about to rush to Mount Saint Crossing. But at this moment, a cold voice sounded, Wait, I also want to pass Mount Saint Crossing. Hearing this familiar voice, Yiguchen's lips curled into a faint smile. He looked over and saw two familiar figures on the Ouyang family's ship. It was Ouyang Fengyun and Ouyang Tianji. The person who spoke was Ouyang Tianji. Ouyang Tianji had already broken through to the divine dwelling stage. The reason he spoke at this time was to suppress Yiguchen. It would be a joke if Yiguchen did not pass as many levels as he did. Ouyang Tianji could also step on Yiguchen's name and become famous in the Sword Dynasty. Hey, it's Ouyang Tianji. He also broke through to the divine dwelling stage. TSK, Ouyang Tianji made a move at this time to embarrass Yiguchen. Many discussions broke out in all directions. This traitorous bastard. Many of the Divine Cliff Academy's disciples were furious. Ouyang Tianji had been cultivating in Sacred Cliff College for a long time, but he was sparing no effort to suppress Yiguchen. Go ahead. Yiguchen smiled faintly, not minding it in the slightest. Ha, then I'll make a fool of myself. Ouyang Tianji laughed and stepped into the first level of Mount Saint Crossing. In an instant, his figure disappeared and entered the first layer of space. Everyone's eyes converged. They were very curious. How many levels could Ouyang Tianji, who had broken through to the divine dwelling stage, pass? And would Yi Guqin be suppressed by Ouyang Tianji? Chapter 960. Mount Saint Crossing, as one of the 4 great secret domains of the Sword Dynasty, had always been a place of pilgrimage for many heaven prides. Without full confidence, no one would rashly challenge Mount Saint Crossing. Ouyang Tianji only dared to challenge it after breaking through to the divine dwelling stage. Seeing Ouyang Tianji's figure disappear from the first level of Mount Saint Crossing, the surrounding hundreds of thousands of experts waited with bated breath. The people on the periphery of Mount Saint Crossing could not see the scene inside. But after breaking through the first level, the outer layer would be shrouded in golden light, which meant that the challenger had broken through the first level. Yi Guqin secretly breathed a sigh of relief after learning about the situation. He indeed could not easily reveal some of his means, or it would easily expose his identity as Yi Guqin of the Sword Sect. And the outside world could not see the scene inside Mount Saint Crossing, which allowed Yi Guqin to use his full strength without holding back. As time passed, a quarter of an hour later, the outer layer of Mount Saint Crossing lit up with golden light. Breakthrough, Ouyang Tianji broke through the first level. Seeing the layer of light, there were some cheers around Mount Saint Crossing. Breaking through the first level in a quarter of an hour was already very fast. If it was a 9th level spirit bridge expert, it would most likely take half an hour. Ah, it seems that the limelight of Mount Saint Crossing today will be stolen by Tianji. Several elders of the Ouyang clan chuckled. Ouyang Fengyun's lips curled into a faint smile. In the ancient Chaos Wasteland, Ouyang Fengyun was also a little angry that he could not do anything to Yi Guqin. At this moment, he was naturally willing to see Yi Guqin's limelight be stolen. Not long after, the outer layer of Mount Saint Crossing lit up with golden light again. Then the third level. Looking at the golden light that lit up one after another, the people of the Ouyang clan grinned from ear to ear. Some of Yi Guqin's enemies could not help but look at Yi Guqin with a mocking smile. If Yi Guqin's performance today was worse than Ouyang Tianji's, then it would be a huge loss of face. Dugu Wubai, when the time comes, let me pass the sacred mountain first. Perhaps that will reduce some of the negative effects. Ling Moyin walked to Yi Guqin's side and said. She did not believe that Yi Guqin could pass the 10th level. When the time came, Yi Guqin would definitely be put in an extremely difficult position. Therefore, Ling Moyin decided to pass through the sacred mountain first to reduce the influence of Ouyang Tianji as much as possible, and also to reduce some of the psychological pressure on Yi Guqin. Whatever. Yi Guqin didn't really care. Ling Moyin gritted her teeth in anger when she saw Yi Guqin's attitude. Why could Yi Guqin be so indifferent and not care at all? Ling Moyin suppressed the anger in her heart. Her face was cold, and she did not say anything else. As time passed, Ouyang Tianji also passed the 5th level of the sacred mountain. After the 5th level, Ouyang Tianji's speed slowed down significantly. It was obvious that after the 5th level, it was not that easy to pass. Ouyang Tianji's speed also changed from the previous 15 minutes to an hour, and then to 2 hours. The 9th level is lit up. Seeing the golden light on the 9th level, the crowd burst into an uproar again. This result was not bad for someone who had just passed the sacred mountain for the first time. Next is the 10th level. As long as he passes the 10th level, Tianji will become a disciple of the Holy Emblem. The people of the Ouyang family were also nervous. The 10th level of the sacred mountain was a huge hurdle. This level was more difficult than the previous 9 levels combined. As long as he passed the 10th level, it meant that he could become a false saint expert in the future. It was also because of this that the 5 academies set the 10th level as a watershed. 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours had passed, but the 10th level still did not light up. The faces of the people of the Ouyang family turned ugly. At this time, the 10th level of the sacred mountain suddenly lit up. However, it was not golden, but red. What does that mean? Yi Guqin asked Mu Xingzu. The red light means that there is a high chance of failure, Mu Xingzu replied. When the red light appeared, the hearts of the people of the Ouyang family sank. As expected, in less than 15 minutes, Ouyang Tianji's figure was sent out of the sacred mountain. At this moment, his clothes were tattered, his breath was weak, and his eyes were bloodshot. It was obvious that he had gone through an extremely difficult battle, but he still failed in the end. Damn it! Ouyang Tianji's face was ugly. If he could pass the 10th level, he would become famous and steal Yi Guqin's limelight. But now, he had only passed the 9th level. Although it was not bad, it was still not enough. It's already not bad to be able to pass the 9th level on your first attempt. In the future, after some preparation, it won't be difficult to pass the 10th level. Ouyang Fengyun said. When these words came out, the people around nodded in agreement. It was not bad to be able to pass the 9th level on your first attempt. Hearing these words of consolation, Ouyang Tianji felt better. He looked at Yi Guqin and sneered, "Sigh, although it's only the 9th level, it shouldn't be the worst result today." Obviously, he was referring to Yi Guqin's result being worse than his. It's only the 9th level, what's the big deal? Although Yi Guqin ignored Ouyang Tianji's provocation, Mu Xingzu could not stand it. "Oh, then let's see how many levels your master can pass." Ouyang Tianji sneered and returned to the Ouyang clan's camp. At present, the situation was delicate. Many people turned to look at Yi Guqin with some amusement. "You're really going to lose face today." Yu Shuangyan sneered. Hua Xingjie, Hua Tingfei, and the others were also waiting for Yi Guqin to embarrass himself. "Let me go first." Ling Moyin stepped forward, the aura of the divine dwelling stage bursting out from her body. Because she had barely broken through, her aura was a little unstable. Seeing Ling Moyin make a move, some people from the other academies revealed looks of disdain. They did not despise Ling Moyin, but Yi Guqin. "Kenpo, is this the sword demon you spoke of? How can he be so irresponsible and use a woman as a shield?" In the sky, the female sword master, Jian Shi, spoke. Her tone could not hide the trace of contempt. In her eyes, Yi Guqin's attitude was indeed beneath his dignity. This. Kenpo was also speechless. He knew that Yi Guqin was not such a person. Maybe Ling Moyin was thinking too much. But in the eyes of outsiders, they mistakenly thought that Yi Guqin took the initiative to use Ling Moyin as a shield. Thus, many whispers rang out around Mount Saint Crossing. All kinds of strange gazes were directed at Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin's expression was indifferent from beginning to end, without the slightest fluctuation. It did not matter whether he went first or later. Only a strong confidence could have such a fearless attitude. On the other side, Ling Moyin took a deep breath and also entered Mount Saint Crossing. Given Ling Moyin's strength, how many levels could she reach? Could she surpass Ouyang Tianji? Everyone present was paying close attention. Chapter 961. In particular, the people of Sacred Cliff College paid more attention to Ling Moyin. Although the main character today was Yi Guqin, Ling Moyin was also a Golden Emblem disciple of Sacred Cliff College. If she performed well, she would bring glory to Sacred Cliff College. Time passed little by little. About half an hour later, the first level of Mount Saint Crossing lit up with a golden brilliance. But this scene did not make the people of Sacred Cliff College happy. This was because Ouyang Tianji only took a quarter of an hour to break through, while Ling Moyin took half an hour. Next, Ling Moyin broke through level by level, and the time she took was also longer than Ouyang Tianji. Is it too much? Bei Xian Elder and the others sighed in their hearts. Ling Moyin's temper was too stubborn and too headstrong. The after effects of her forcibly breaking through to the divine dwelling stage only appeared at this moment. The instability of one's cultivation level was extremely fatal for breaking through Mount Saint Crossing. Ah! Ouyang Tianji smiled faintly. He obviously already knew the outcome. Senior Sister Ling is a little too much. She won't fail, right? some of the Sacred Cliff College disciples looked worried. Ling Mo Shu, who had been drinking, was holding the wine jug so tightly that the veins on his hand bulged, and a deep pain flashed in his eyes. The reason why Ling Moyin became like this was because she wanted to avenge Ling Mo Shu and deal with Hua Wuxiu. Boring. On the Hua family's side, Hua Wuxiu sat cross-legged, took out a chessboard and chess pieces, and began to play chess. He obviously did not care about Ling Moyin breaking through the levels. Finally, Ling Moyin was stuck on the 7th level of Mount Saint Crossing. 2 hours later, the 7th level did not light up with a golden brilliance, but a red brilliance. It meant that Ling Moyin was about to fail. In less than a quarter of an hour, Ling Moyin was teleported out. She looked exhausted, and blood was flowing from the corner of her mouth. 7th level. Ling Moyin stared blankly at Mount Saint Crossing, her jade-like hands clenched tightly. She didn't even notice that her fingernails had pierced through her tender white palm. Blood flowed out from the gaps between her fingers. To be able to clear the 7th floor of the Sage Mountain for the first time, it was already not bad. However, Ouyang Tianji had already passed the 9th level. In comparison, Ling Moyin was naturally a little embarrassed. For Ling Moyin, who had a strong personality, this was an absolute humiliation. Her confidence was trampled. TSK, what a pity. There are only 7 levels. Actually, the 7th floor is not bad, but it's a pity that I picked the wrong time. I heard that this Ling Moyin wants to avenge her brother and deal with Hua Wuxiu. With this level, she wants to take revenge on Hua Wuxiu. Yeah. She doesn't even know what she's capable of. She's really out of her mind. After the results of Ling Moyin's challenge came out, there were a lot of discussions on all sides. Although most people felt that it was a pity. There were also a small number of people who were extremely harsh. Especially the group of people from the Hua family. Their tone was full of ridicule and disdain for Ling Moyin. No matter how strong Ling Moyin's personality was, she was still a woman. At this moment, her delicate body was trembling, and she bit her lips until they bled. Moyin, come back. On the side of Sacred Cliff College, palace leader Luo Feng sighed softly and said. After all, Ling Moyin was his disciple. He couldn't just stand by and do nothing. Sorry to disappoint everyone, Ling Moyin returned to Sacred Cliff College's ship. Her face was pale and had lost all color. She glanced at Yi Guqin, lowered her head, and brushed past him. At this moment, Ling Moyin's stubbornness and pride were completely shattered. Of course, she still didn't think that Yi Guqin had the power to reverse the situation. However, Ling Moyin's challenge was ultimately just an interlude. The real protagonist today was Yi Guqin. However, just as Yi Guqin was about to step out, a calm voice sounded. I haven't challenged the sacred mountain for a long time. Today, I'll try again. Hearing this voice, the expressions of over 400,000 warriors froze at the same time. Because the person who said this was none other than Hua Wuxiu. As one of the most famous prodigies of the Sword Dynasty, Hua Wuxiu's strength was unquestionable. And his previous result was only second to Purple, who was first on the sword leaderboard, and Jian Jinghong, who was second. Hua Wuxiu's result was the same as Xuanlian's, which was the 17th floor. No one expected that Hua Wuxiu would choose to challenge the tower again today. Many inexplicable gazes were directed at Yi Guqin. Sigh, it seems like the Hua family and the other aristocratic families are going to completely suppress Dugu Wubai today, some warriors thought. It was obvious that the Hua family wanted to suppress Yi Guqin's prestige. This is normal. Although Dugu Wubai's strength isn't weak, his personality is too arrogant. It's good to suppress him, some people from the aristocratic family's camp sneered. This, on the side of Sacred Cliff College, the elders and the 5 temple masters didn't look too good. With Hua Wuxiu's appearance, Yi Guqin's glory was likely to be completely overshadowed. The contrast was too big. Next, Hua Wuxiu began to challenge Mount Saint Pass. What made everyone gasp was that the first floor lit up almost immediately after Hua Wuxiu stepped into Mount Saint Pass. Then, In less than 10 breaths, the second floor lit up again. After 15 minutes, the third floor lit up again. This speed made many people dumbfounded. Without comparison, there would be no harm. Ling Moyin's mouth was full of bitterness. She was very embarrassed. This kind of comparison was very hurtful. No wonder he has no cultivation. Hua Yintao's sullen old face also revealed a smile. This Hua Wuxiu's strength is indeed not weak. Shualian's face was also slightly serious. This kind of speed was too shocking. Even at the 10th floor, Hua Wuxiu only stayed for half an hour before completely breaking through. After the 10th floor, Hua Wuxiu's speed slowed down. Because after the 10th floor, the difficulty of the next 10 floors was more than 10 times higher than the previous 10 floors. Even Hua Wuxiu couldn't maintain such a fast speed. But after that, Hua Wuxiu still broke through the 11th, 12th, and 13th floors in a very rhythmic manner. All the way to the 17th floor. Hua Wuxiu's previous result was to break through the 17th floor. After a full 6 hours, the 17th floor lit up with a golden light. At this moment, the hearts of all the Hua family members were in their throats. Because if he could break through the next 18 floors, Hua Wuxiu would break his own record again and be tied with Jian Jinghong. Everyone in Sacred Cliff College prayed that Hua Wuxiu would not break through the 18th floor. But things didn't go as they wished. After waiting for a full 10 hours, the 18th floor of Mount St. Crossing lit up with an extremely dazzling golden light, dyeing the surrounding sky and earth a golden color. Hua Wuxiu had broken through to the 18th floor. Almost at the moment of breaking through, Hua Wuxiu's figure was teleported out. At this moment, he was also panting and exhausted, but there was a trace of a smile on his face. He broke through. Hua Wuxiu broke through the 18th floor. There was an uproar around Mount St. Crossing, as if it could break the sky. The last few floors of Mount St. Crossing were more difficult than the previous one. It could be said that the 18th floor was more difficult than the previous 17 floors combined. And yet, Hua Wuxiu had broken through. As a result, the reputation of the entire Tensei College and the Hua family instantly reached the peak. On the other hand, all the disciples of Sacred Cliff College lowered their heads. Ling Moyin felt a sense of powerlessness, both mentally and physically exhausted. Only now did she realize how big the gap was between her and Hua Wuxiu. The so-called revenge for Ling Mo Shu was just an extremely naive idea. Next, it's finally my turn. Ling Moyin's failure didn't affect Yiguchin at all. He smiled faintly and stepped forward. Chapter 962. Looking at Yiguchin's indifferent expression, the hundreds of thousands of martial artists around Mount St. Crossing were all surprised. Did he not know how good Hua Wuxiu's results were? Didn't you see that everyone from the Divine Cliff Academy had withered like eggplants that had been hit by frost? Why was Yiguchin still so indifferent? Yiguchin's attitude was really surprising. Even Hua Wuxiu gave Yiguchin a deep look. Is he pretending, or? Hua Wuxiu murmured in his heart. He would not underestimate any opponent, but with Yiguchin's strength at the 6th stage of the Spirit Bridge of Heaven and Earth, passing Mount St. Crossing was really overestimating himself. He's just pretending to be calm. Hua Shengjie sneered. He wanted to see Yiguchin's miserable appearance the most. Still pretending. Yu Shuangyan also thought that Yiguchin was pretending. The others who were hostile to Yiguchin, such as Hua Mo, Hua Dongfei, Yin Wufeng, Ouyang Fengyun, and Ouyang Tianji, all thought that Yiguchin was pretending. Kenpo, I don't know how strong your friend is, but his character is not bad. Jian Wu said. Not bad character. He's only at the 6th stage of the Spirit Bridge of Heaven and Earth. How many levels of Mount St. Crossing can he pass? I think he's just pretending. Jian Shi curled his lips. She was able to become one of the 13 sword masters as a woman, so she naturally had her own pride. And with Yiguchin's current cultivation, it was really difficult to pass Mount St. Crossing. You'll regret underestimating Brother Dugu. Kenpo smiled faintly. Even the clear sky real dragon, whose name shook the entire South Horizon region, had been severely injured by Yiguchen. Anyone who underestimated Yiguchen would not have a good ending. Alright, I'll wait and see, Jian Shi said disdainfully. At this moment, Yiguchen was the center of attention. Yiguchen did not feel the slightest bit of pressure when he sensed the hundreds of thousands of gazes on him. Dugu Wubai, it's finally your turn. I still remember the stakes. Hua Yuntao's tone was indifferent. With a flip of his hand, a jade bottle appeared. Opening the jade bottle, a white pill floated up into the air, rippling faintly. It was the bone-sculpting saint pill. Yiguchen's eyes lit up as he glanced around. The bone-molding saint pill was one of the 3 main materials needed to refine the avatar. Yiguchen had to get his hands on it. But don't forget about your bet, Hua Yuntao said with a threatening tone. Don't worry, Yiguchen said indifferently, stepping directly into the first level of Mount Saint Crossing. All the surrounding martial artists held their breaths at this moment. Dugu Wubai, how many levels can you pass? Wu Hongyan looked at Mount Saint Crossing with interest and murmured in her heart. Master, you can do it. Mu Xingzu's palms were sweating. No one was optimistic about Yiguchen. Even the people of Sacred Cliff College did not have any hope for Yiguchen. With Hua Wuxiu in front of him, Yiguchen could not surpass him no matter how good his performance was. Therefore, in the eyes of everyone, what Yiguchen needed to do now was not how to surpass Hua Wuxiu, but how to break through the 10th level and surpass Ouyang Tianji. If he couldn't even compare to Ouyang Tianji, then the reputation of the sword demon would be completely destroyed in a single night. Everyone held their breaths. Everyone was waiting to see. How would Yiguchen perform? Just as more than 400,000 martial artists outside were watching, Yiguchen entered the space of the first level. The entire space seemed to be empty. Looking around, there were dozens of iron puppets inside. As soon as Yiguchen entered, the surrounding puppets surrounded him. The strength of these puppets was around Tiandi Lingxiao's. The first few levels of Mount Saint Crossing were not particularly difficult to pass, and the difficulty was not very high. Yiguchen did not even use the 9-dragon thunder prison. Using his fingers as a sword, he used the 6-pulse divine sword. Sword chi shot out from his fingers, repelling the puppets. In just a few breaths, Yiguchen broke through the first level. Dugu Wubai broke through the first level. Seeing the light of the first level, some people exclaimed in a low voice. Dugu Wubai's speed is not much slower than Hua Wuxiu's. It's just the first level. It's not difficult. It doesn't mean anything. Seeing Yiguchen break through, although there were some discussions, they were not too surprised. Yiguchen could not even break through the first level. That would be a joke. Although it's only the first level, his speed is faster than Ouyang Tianji and Ling Moyin, Jian Wu muttered. That doesn't mean anything, Jian Shi retorted. On the second level, Yiguchen encountered puppets again. But their strength had reached stage 9, and their numbers were not reduced at all. In just a moment, Yiguchen broke through the second level again. Then the third level, the fourth level, Yiguchen tirelessly broke through the mountain without stopping at all. But outside, some martial artists' faces had already begun to freeze. Yiguchen's speed was definitely not slow. In fact, it could be considered very fast. Dugu Wubai's strength is only at stage 6, right? Why is his speed so fast? Even if the first few levels are not particularly difficult, Ouyang Tianji and Ling Moyin still spent a lot of time to break through. The speed that Yiguchen had displayed had indeed surprised the group of people. What's going on? The Hua family looked at each other. It should be because of his quasi-tribulation divine weapon, the 9-dragon thunder prison, Hua Wuxiu said with a deep gaze. As soon as he said that, everyone was instantly relieved. I see. Dugu Wubai must have used the 9-dragon thunder prison. The 9-dragon thunder prison is not weak. Thinking about it, it's reasonable for him to be so fast. Hua Wuxiu's words cleared everyone's doubts. Yiguchen was relying on the power of the divine weapon to have such speed. Ah. I thought Dugu Wubai was really capable, but it turns out that he's only relying on the divine weapon. In the sky, Jian Shi shook his head slightly, his voice filled with disappointment. Kenpo did not refute and frowned slightly. He did not believe that Yi Guqin would only rely on the weapon. Sai, although he has the help of the 9-Dragon Thunder Prison, the later levels are getting harder and harder. Relying on the divine weapon alone is useless. On the side of Sacred Cliff College, many elders sighed. Young Master Dugu. Han Lingxian clenched her jade-like hands and prayed in her heart. At this moment, Yi Guqin was not only representing himself, but also the entire Sacred Cliff College. 7th level of Mount Saint Crossing. 3 puppets appeared in front of Yi Guqin. Each puppet exuded the aura of the Divine Palace level. Finally, it's a little interesting. Looking at the 3 Divine Palace puppets, Yi Guqin smiled faintly. In the previous 6 levels, Yi Guqin did not even use the Supreme Grade Divine Weapon, let alone the 9-Dragon Thunder Prison. That level of difficulty was not easy for Yi Guqin, but it was not strenuous either. But on this level, I still don't need to rely on the power of the 9-Dragon Thunder Prison. Yi Guqin's hair fluttered and his eyes were clear. Golden light flowed on the surface of his body as he activated the flawless diamond body. Yi Guqin wanted to use these 3 Divine Palace puppets to test his physical strength. Therefore, he still chose not to use the 9-Dragon Thunder Prison. Chapter 963. For Yi Guqin, breaking through the sacred mountain was not just a bet. It was a trial. During this period of time, Yi Guqin had made successive breakthroughs. He wanted to use the sacred mountain to polish his body and cultivation, and thoroughly consolidate his cultivation. If it were an ordinary person, they would be badly battered just by breaking through the mountain. But Yi Guqin wanted to use this opportunity to temper himself. Unfortunately, the people outside the sacred mountain could not see the scene inside the sacred mountain. They also did not know that Yi Guqin had such a plan. In the blink of an eye, Yi Guqin had been on the 7th floor of the sacred mountain for more than an hour. Compared to the previous speed, it was completely slowed down. Sure enough, even with the power of the 9-Dragon Thunder Prison, he has finally encountered a difficulty. Yes, wasn't Ling Moyin stuck on the 7th floor before? She was still at the Divine Dwelling stage. Although Dugu Wubai has the 9-Dragon Thunder Prison, it won't be so easy to break through the 7th floor. Seeing that the 7th floor had not lit up for a long time, many cultivators around the sacred mountain shook their heads and sighed. In fact, this result was not beyond their expectations. Yi Guqin's strength was only at the 6th level. It was already beyond their expectations that he could break through to the 7th floor. Ah, he should have reached his limit. Hua Yuntao's old face also pulled out a faint smile. Sacred Cliff College is full of people who overestimate themselves. Ling Mo Shu is like that, and Dugu Wubai is also like that. Hua Wuxiu shook his head slightly. He remembered Ling Mo Shu, who had drawn his sword at him in the 5 academies competition. Some people were really ignorant. He did not hide his words in the slightest, so the people of Sacred Cliff College also clearly heard it. Hateful. The faces of all the Sacred Cliff College disciples instantly flushed red, and a kind of anger burned in their pupils. Their Sacred Cliff College was once the #1 college in the Sword Dynasty. But now, they were ranked last and were constantly humiliated by Tensei College. At that time, during the 5 academies competition, Ling Mo Shu angrily attacked with his sword because he wanted to protect the reputation of Sacred Cliff College. But in the end, he still suffered a crushing defeat at the hands of Hua Wuxiu. As a result, his divine dwelling was destroyed and he became a cripple. At this moment, Hua Wuxiu opened up the scar again. It was still dripping with blood. Ling Mo Shu's hand trembled violently as he held the wine jug. He lowered his head and clenched his teeth tightly. If there was a choice, who would be willing to sink? Brother. Ling Moyin looked at Ling Mo Shu's pained expression. She felt the same way, and her heart felt like it was being twisted by a knife. Hey, little friend Dugu, is this the end? Bei Xian elder let out a long sigh. Junior sister Mu, is this the invincible master you spoke of? He couldn't even touch the corner of Jian Jinghong's clothes. Suki Miyazaki shook her head. She thought she would see a wonderful scene, but it turned out that there was no suspense at all. Mu Xingzu clenched her jade-like hands. She didn't refute and just stared at Mount Saint Crossing without blinking. She believed that Yi Guqin would use facts to give all those who humiliated him a slap in the face. On the 7th floor of Mount Saint Crossing, Yi Guqin fought with the 3 divine dwelling stage puppets with his physical body. He fought to his heart's content, and his blood was boiling. Ha, again. Yi Guqin's eyes were deep, and his black hair fluttered in the wind. Ever since he concealed his identity and came to the Sword Dynasty, he had never fought to his heart's content. Boom. 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 Finally, after an hour, a golden light suddenly lit up outside the 7th floor of Mount Saint Crossing. This light was reflected in everyone's eyes. He passed, Dugu Wubai passed the 7th floor. One of the martial artists yelled. What followed was an extreme uproar. No one thought that Yi Guqin would be able to pass the 7th floor. It should be said that even Ling Moyin, who was at the divine dwelling stage, had not broken through. Of course, Ling Moyin's cultivation was also unstable. But Yi Guqin, who was able to pass the 7th floor with his cultivation at the 6th level of the Heaven and Earth Spirit Bridge, was definitely not bad. Oh, it seems that Dugu Wubai is not completely useless. In the sky, the 4 sword suns stood side by side. Jian Shi's tone was a little surprised. He obviously did not expect Yi Guqin to be able to pass the 7th floor. Oh, you're surprised? You'll be surprised later. Kenpo smiled mysteriously. He knew that Yi Guqin might be holding back a big move. So what if he passed the 7th floor? He passed. At this moment, Ling Moyin's mood was extremely complicated. Shame, embarrassment, all kinds of emotions were churning in her heart. She thought of her distrust of Yi Guqin before. But she herself, even after breaking through to the divine dwelling stage, was unable to pass the 7th floor. However, Yi Guqin managed to break through. Dugu Wubai, I was wrong about you, completely wrong. Ling Moyin laughed at herself bitterly. You have some ability. Hua Yuntao raised his eyelids slightly. Although surprised, he was still calm. The next 3 floors would be even more difficult. Not only Hua Yuntao, but all the other cultivators also thought that the 7th floor was Yi Guqin's limit. If he went any further, even with the 9-dragon thunder prison, it would be difficult to pass. On the 8th floor of Mount Saint Crossing, Yi Guqin seemed to have entered the interior of a volcano. An incomparably huge lava snake was staring at Yi Guqin with its scarlet eyes. This lava snake had a total of 3 heads, and its aura was quite terrifying. Rank 6 Monster Beast. Yi Guqin frowned slightly as he sensed the aura of the 3 lava snakes. Although they were both rank 6 monsters, this lava snake was obviously much more powerful than the Death Worm King that Yi Guqin had killed before. Moreover, the reason why Yi Guqin was able to kill the Death Worm King was largely because of the restraint of the strange fire and thunder, coupled with the power of the 9-dragon thunder prison. And the strange fire and thunder obviously did not have much of a restraining effect on this lava snake. In addition, monsters of the same level were stronger than human cultivators. This lava snake could pose a great threat even to the heaven prides of the divine dwelling stage. It's only the 8th floor, and it's already so difficult. It's really hard to imagine how difficult the next 10 floors will be. But this way, it will be interesting. Yi Guqin's eyes were burning with the flames of war. With a flick of his wrist, the 9-dragon thunder prison appeared in his hand. At the 8th floor, Yi Guqin was no longer as relaxed as before. Kill! Yi Guqin charged out with his sword, fighting with the lava snake. Outside, everyone was still waiting. This 8th floor should be Dugu Wubai's final point, many cultivators thought. Oh, even a divine dwelling stage expert would find it difficult to withstand the challenge of the 8th floor. It would be strange if he could pass it with his rank 6 cultivation. Ouyang Tianji loudly mocked, trying to belittle Yiguchen. The people of Sacred Cliff College were furious, but they could not refute. Shut up. Mu Xingzu could not bear to listen anymore. Oh, what, did I say something wrong? Ouyang Tianji sneered. However, as soon as his voice faded, he heard a roar that soared into the sky. He passed, the 8th floor is lit up. Countless exclamations surged like a tide. WH. What? Ouyang Tianji's face froze in an instant. Everyone stared blankly at the 8th floor, which was emitting a golden light. Did he break through so quickly? Countless gasps could be heard from the audience. What kind of speed was that? On the 8th floor, Yiguchen's aura was overflowing. With the 9-dragon thunder prison in his hand, 2 lightning serpent spirits appeared. Yiguchen had never used the 9-dragon thunder prison before, but now that he did, it was as if a god had helped him. It was not surprising that he had such speed. Next, something even more shocking happened. In less than half an hour, the 9th floor of Mount Saint Crossing lit up again. Crazy. Everyone thought their eyes were playing tricks on them. People couldn't help but wonder if Yiguchen had cheated in some way. The 9th floor lit up, which meant that Yiguchen had entered the 10th floor. As long as Yiguchen passed the 10th floor, he would become a disciple of the Holy Emblem and win the bet. Chapter 964. At this moment, everyone felt like they were in a dream. It was as if they had fallen into a dream. They could not understand why Yiguchen's speed was getting faster and faster. They naturally didn't know that Yiguchen didn't rely on the power of a divine weapon at all when he passed the 7th floor. Instead, he used his bare hands to fight. Now, Yiguchen had taken out a quasi-heavenly tribulation divine weapon. Naturally, he was unstoppable. It was not surprising that he had such speed. If Dugu Wubai can pass the 10th floor, then this bet. All the cultivators present swallowed a mouthful of saliva, feeling that their throats were very dry. They couldn't imagine how Yiguchen, who was only at the 6th level of cultivation, could pass the 10th floor. It can't be. Everyone in the Hua family was a little dazed. Many people couldn't help but look at Hua Yuntao. At this moment, Hua Yuntao's old face was solemn, and his eyes were as gloomy as water. Even Hua Yuntao didn't expect that Yiguchen could really pass the 10th floor. Elder Hua, don't worry. The 10th floor is a major hurdle, more difficult than the previous 9 combined. Even an ordinary divine dwelling expert would find it difficult to pass, Hua Wuxiu said indifferently. The 10th floor was a major hurdle. Passing through this floor meant that one had the potential to become a false saint. There was only one person in a million with such potential. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so few Holy Emblem disciples in the Sword Dynasty. He absolutely can't pass it. Ouyang Tianji clenched his fists. Even he couldn't pass it, so how could Yiguchen pass it? It's impossible to succeed, absolutely impossible. Yu Shuangyan also bit her red lips. But for some reason, there was a rare trace of wavering in her heart. At this moment, everyone who was hostile to Yiguchen didn't want the 10th floor to light up. On the other side, everyone in Sacred Cliff College was praying. Senior brother Dugu, you must succeed. Break through the 10th floor and give the Hua family a tight slap. The eyes of all the Sacred Cliff College students were bloodshot, and they couldn't help but roar. Hua Wuxiu's previous humiliation had shamed the entire Sacred Cliff College. Everyone was holding their breath. Dugu Wubai, you're right. I'm a coward. So. I hope you can succeed. Ling Mo Shu smiled dejectedly. He picked up the wine jug and emptied his sorrows. Dugu Wubai, I've been wrong about you. You must succeed. Ling Moin prayed in her heart. At this moment, she completely let go of her prejudice against Yiguchen. Since Yiguchen was able to reach the 10th level, it meant that his previous attitude was not arrogant, but that he had the strength to begin with. Master, you can do it. Mu Xingzu couldn't help but shout. Big brother Dugu, you can do it. Kong Kong also shouted. Outside Mount Saint Crossing, everyone had different thoughts. On the 10th floor, Yiguchen was facing 5 divine dwelling stage puppets. But this was not the most fatal thing. The most fatal thing was that Yiguchen's strength was suppressed by more than 30% the moment he stepped into the 10th floor. This 30% was not just limited to his true chi. His soul power, physical strength, and other aspects of his strength were weakened by 30%. No wonder the 10th floor is such a big hurdle. Even if one's divine dwelling stage cultivation is weakened by 30%, it's still very fatal, let alone 5 divine dwelling stage puppets. Sensing that his strength was suppressed, Yiguchen's face didn't show the slightest hint of panic. He was still very calm. He finally understood why so many people were stumped by the 10th floor. Kill! The 5 divine dwelling stage puppets let out murderous roars as they besieged Yiguchen. Come and fight! Yiguchen's 9 dragon thunder prison swept out, its aura extremely powerful. Although his strength was weakened by 30%, one shouldn't forget that Yiguchen still had the heaven-devouring secret technique. But he didn't use it directly. Instead, he wanted to test the limits of his combat strength. Although the 5 divine dwelling stage puppets' offensive methods were not as good as true divine dwelling stage experts, their combat strength was at the divine dwelling stage. Boom! 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 Monstrous ripples suddenly burst out in the space, and true chi scattered in all directions. So strong. Yiguchen's figure was blasted back, the chi and blood in his chest churning. The 30% suppression of his strength still had an impact on him. The 5 divine dwelling stage puppets didn't know exhaustion, and they didn't leave the slightest gap as they besieged Yiguchen. Yiguchen was caught in a bitter battle. A quarter of an hour. An hour. 2 hours. Time gradually passed, but there was still no sign of the 10th floor of Mount Saint Crossing lighting up. The cheers of Sacred Cliff College gradually weakened. The longer the battle dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for the challenger. This was common knowledge. Ah, it should be about time. Ouyang Tianji revealed a gloating smile. He had previously passed through the 10th floor of Mount Saint Crossing, so he knew how difficult the 10th floor was. Even ordinary divine dwelling stage experts couldn't pass it, so how could a 6th level heaven and earth spirit bridge be possible? And at this moment, a red light suddenly lit up outside the 10th floor. When they saw the dazzling red radiance appear, everyone from the Divine Cliff Academy almost stopped breathing. We're going to fail. Some Sacred Cliff College disciples said dejectedly. Sigh. Bei Xian Elder sighed deeply. Although he had expected it, Bei Xian Elder still sighed when he saw it with his own eyes. What a pity. Luo Feng shook his head slightly. Sacred Cliff College had lost a genius disciple just like that. Really, we're going to fail. Ling Moyin was slightly absent-minded. Ha, as expected. Hua Shengjie, Hua Tengfei, and the others all breathed a sigh of relief and laughed. Ah. Hua Yuntao's gloomy old face also relaxed slightly, and a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He's still too young after all. Hua Yuntao sneered in his heart. At this time, in the 10th floor, Yiguchen's mouth was bleeding, and there were wounds on his body. And there were only 3 puppets left in front of him. But Yiguchen's condition was not good at the moment. He was injured, and if not for his strong body, Yiguchen's combat power would have been damaged. It's almost time to break through, Yiguchen muttered to himself. Devouring power burst out from his body, and his whole body seemed to have turned into a black hole, swallowing endless spiritual energy. Sky-devouring secret technique. Yiguchen let out a loud cry and finally displayed his trump card, the heaven-devouring secret skill. As one of the top 10 ancient secret techniques, there was no doubt about the power of the sky-devouring secret technique. Even if Yiguchen had only comprehended the first level of the secret technique, it could still increase Yiguchen's cultivation by 3 small realms. His originally suppressed strength immediately soared again, erupting like a volcano. His eyes were as dark as the night. Qianyang's sword of extinction, kill. Yi Guqian's aura was unprecedentedly strong, and his true qi swept out like a storm. He slashed out with his sword, and the golden sword light swept towards one of the divine dwelling puppets as if it had cut through the sun. Not only that, Yi Guqian changed his sword stance again and displayed the Star Destroyer sword. Then, the Star Destroyer sword and the Qianyang sword of extinction merged into one. Two swords combine, star sun flowing fire. The sword light was like a boiling volcano, and as if it had turned into a torrent of scarlet flames, it directly submerged the three divine dwelling puppets. This was the combination of the Qianyang sword of extinction and the Star Destroyer sword, star sun flowing fire. At the same time, the red light on the periphery of Mount St. Crossing suddenly turned golden. An incomparably dazzling golden light illuminated the surroundings. The 10th floor of Mount St. Crossing had been broken through. Chapter 965. On the 10th floor of Mount St. Crossing, the dazzling golden light illuminated heaven and earth. Some warriors couldn't even open their eyes. How is this possible? Ouyang Tianji was completely dumbfounded. The golden light reflected on his slightly distorted face, making him look somewhat comical. All the warriors present seemed to have lost their souls at the same time. Everyone's thoughts seemed to have frozen in an instant. They could not figure out how Yi Guqian had broken through to the 10th level all of a sudden. This was simply illogical. The smile on Hua Yuntao's face froze. His breath was uncontrollably chaotic, showing that Hua Yuntao's heart was not calm. Hua Wuxiu also frowned and stared at the 10th floor of Mount St. Crossing. This shouldn't be possible. Hua Xingjie, Hua Tengfei, and the others were even paler. How could Yi Guqian have broken through the 10th floor of Mount St. Crossing? Not to mention them, even the people from Sacred Cliff College couldn't come back to their senses. Senior brother Dugu has broken through the 10th floor. A Sacred Cliff College disciple asked in a daze. It seems so. Another disciple also answered in a daze. Ling Moyin, the elders, and even the 5 temple masters were somewhat stunned. Happiness came too suddenly. This kid made us worry for nothing. Bei Xian elder couldn't help but laugh. He was extremely carefree. Although he didn't dare to believe it, the truth was the truth. He really did it. Ling Moyin was also stunned. Yi Guqian really used facts to prove that his attitude wasn't arrogance and ignorance, but that he really had the strength. Mu Xingzu was also very happy. She turned to Tianxian College and looked at Suki Miyazaki. Senior Sister Gong, can you still say that my master is weak now? Even if he can break through the 10th floor, he's still far from Jian Jinghong. Jian Jinghong broke through the 18th floor. Suki Miyazaki's face was slightly unnatural, but she still insisted. Sigh, my disciple flew away. Wu Hongyan sighed slightly, but she didn't seem to be too disappointed. There was even a trace of a smile in her beautiful eyes. Yi Guqian's character was very much to her liking. And now, the fact that Yi Guqian's strength was absolutely worthy of his character. In the sky, Jian Shi said indifferently, all right, Kenpo, I admit that this Dugu Wubai is quite capable. Heh. Maybe that's not all. Kenpo smiled. What do you mean? Jian Shi's tone became serious. He surprises everyone every time, Saber 9 said with a chuckle. Yi Guqian breaking through the 10th floor of Mount St. Crossing caused an uproar among the hundreds of thousands of martial artists. Although there were some opponents, such as Yu Shuangyan and Yin Wufeng, who thought that Yi Guqian was cheating, however, most of the people rolled their eyes at him. Everyone knew that Mount St. Crossing was one of the 4 great mystic realms. There were special rules, and no one could cheat. Heh, Elder Hua, it seems like this Dugu Wubai is still going to stay at Sacred Cliff College. Great Elder Yi Mei also had a smile on his face. Hua Yuntao's brows were gloomy, and his eyes were gloomy. He didn't say much. A bone-molding divine elixir was nothing to Hua Yuntao. The most important thing was that he had completely lost his reputation as a false saint. Even Hua Wuxiu frowned slightly. He felt the provocative gazes from Sacred Cliff College. He just broke through the 10th floor. What's the big deal? Hua Wuxiu said coldly. He was someone who had broken through the 18th floor, and was on par with Jian Jinghong. Right now, Mount Saint Crossing was filled with endless exclamations from all directions. Ye Guqin being able to break through the 10th floor and become a disciple of the Holy Emblem with his cultivation at stage 6 of the spiritual bridge of heaven and earth was indeed shocking. However, everyone realized that Ye Guqin still hadn't come out. How can it be? Since Dugu Wubai has broken through the 10th floor, why hasn't he been sent out? Is he going to continue? Everyone reacted, and they couldn't hide the surprise in their eyes. Ye Guqin was going to continue. Huh, sure. Bei Xian Elder smiled. Ye Guqin had already broken through the 10th floor, so there was nothing to worry about. It didn't matter even if he failed later. After all, Ye Guqin had only cultivated in Sacred Cliff College for 3 months. If he cultivated for a year, Ye Guqin might be on par with Hua Wuxiu and the others. How arrogant. Does he still have the ability to break through? Ouyang Tianji's face was ugly. He had hoped to completely suppress Ye Guqin this time. Who would have thought that he would be the one suppressed? At this moment, not a single person in the surroundings echoed his words. Even Ouyang Fengyun was frowning. Ouyang Tianji was extremely embarrassed, and his heart was filled with anger and shame. However, reality immediately slapped Ouyang Tianji in the face. Not long after, the 11th floor of Mount Saint Crossing lit up with golden light again. 4 hours later, the 12th floor lit up. Then it was the 13th floor. Floor after floor lit up with golden light, and exclamations surged like a tide from all directions. After Ye Guqin broke through the 10th floor, his speed was like a hot knife through butter. The Hua family's faces became more and more gloomy. The 15th floor, Dugu Wubai has broken through the 15th floor. Some people shouted in horror. The 15th floor lit up again. As expected of Master. Mu Xingzu smiled like a flower, and her bright eyes curved like crescent moons. Finally, Ye Guqin's momentum stopped at the 17th floor. There were no opponents on the 17th floor, and it was a vast expanse of white all around. There was only one stairway to heaven that extended endlessly into the distance. Ye Guqin stepped on the stairway, one step at a time. This level wasn't a test of the challenger's strength. Ye Guqin couldn't use any means or strength in this space, and could only keep walking down the stairway to heaven. How long did he have to walk? Where was the end? There was no answer at all. What was even more strange was that in this space, even time seemed to be blurred. Ye Guqin felt like he had walked for 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years. He also finally understood what the test of the 17th floor was. It was perseverance. If a martial artist couldn't endure a long night of loneliness, how could he reach the peak and laugh at the world? In the end, Ye Guqin didn't know how long he walked, and felt that the vast sea had turned into mulberry fields. And the road ahead still didn't have an end. If it were an ordinary person, it would absolutely be impossible to endure this kind of dullness and despair. Turn back and be saved, and you can leave. At this time, an ethereal voice came into Ye Guqin's ears. As long as Ye Guqin turned back, he could leave this despairing space. When Ye Guqin heard this, the corners of his mouth hooked up into a smile. In order to comprehend the sword, I sat alone on a high mountain cliff for more than 10 years, because I couldn't find an opponent. I was invincible under the heavens, and lonely for half my life. This kind of loneliness, to me, is nothing. Ye Guqin smiled freely, and the thought of retreating didn't arise in his heart at all. If life is like a game of chess, I'm willing to be a pawn. In this vast world, who can make me retreat half a step? The instant Ye Guqin took a step forward, the entire space shattered in an instant. Mount Saint Crossing 17th floor, broken through. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.